So one of my partners is subscribed to product recall alerts, like when basically when food needs to be like suddenly recalled from supermarkets, you can be subscribed to just like get texts about what's gone wrong. And it's always the wackiest shit that's just like 60,000 packets of Jelly Babies recalled because they're full of glass or whatever. And I was with her this week, and she got a text that was like crumpets. A bunch of crumpets had been recalled because they had little bits of metal in them. And but this is what I mean. It's always this, right? It's always just like a food and then like something you don't want in food.
Yeah.
And
like we put razors in the cereal. The razor factory is right next door.
Yeah, exactly. We found little Lego heads in the M&Ms. But little bits of metal in the crumpets, and it was 4 brands of crumpet, all had little bits of metal in them, so must come from the same factory. And the 4 brands were Morrison Basic, Morrison Regular Crumpets, Morrison Taste the Difference Crumpets, and Hovis Crumpets.
I love taste the difference. The differences.
Yeah.
I was reminded. I thought this was really funny, and then I was reading some of Half Earth Socialism yesterday, and I was reading a bit about Cuba. And Mule, I texted you some pictures of the pages because I was like, oh shit, Cuba once again, stay winning. And I was just like, under communism, all the stuff will be made in the same place and it'll all be completely identical. And we're so lucky to have all this variety under capitalism, and everything's so different. And aren't we so lucky?
You get crumpets with and without metal in them.
Yes.
That's great. Yeah, I love all those pictures because it'll be like a picture of an American fully stocked supermarket, and then it'll be another one and it'll be like, this is a supermarket under socialism, and then it turns out it's just like from somewhere in America, and it's like
the same supermarket like 2 weeks later as the economy got worse. Like I always take pictures of like whenever I'm in big Tesco and like the shelves have gotten completely barren. I always take those pictures and send them to my friends and like, this is what it'd be like living under communism.
Yeah.
Okay, it's Red Planet, everyone. Welcome to the show. Mule, what's the most base thing you did this week?
Well, Sophie, the most base thing that I did this week is probably chairing another housing rights assembly yesterday. It was quite interesting this time because we had it in a different part of Manchester, in a place called Withington, and there was less people there, but so there was less people there with problems with the landlord, and actually more people who had still problems with the landlord, but more time to help and support, and they'd kind of turn up to the assembly to specifically be like, I'm here to support other people. And actually, we got another homeowner who turned up, but this time it wasn't for their own problem. It was for it was actually a really sad story, and I don't think I'm going to share the details of it because it's really, really sad. But basically, like, it involves a bit of death and horrible stuff like that. And basically, because she's a homeowner who's sort of like there on behalf of a tenant, she was like, listen, I'm probably going to be really sound sorting all this out, leading on this dispute, with a bit of support from yourself. So I'd actually really like to help other people as well, because obviously this person that she's there on behalf of was really close to her and close to her family kind of thing. So yeah, it was actually really good to sort of get that done, and it meant that we could focus on a repeat visitor, like a repeat member who's like been to the first one, joined up, come back to this one and said, right, I've thought about what I want to put in my demands letter, let's do it. So we actually just sat there at the end and did the demands letter with her, because she's dyslexic and can't like read or write too well. She basically just dictated it to me. That's how we did it. We were like, yo, yeah, do you want to just like tell me what to write? And so I just did that with like a lot of input from the other members. And it was really, really good. And it was what you could see happen actually was this sort of progression of someone who was in tears the first time she came to the meeting. She was so devastated and hurt by her housing situation, found it very embarrassing to talk about and shameful, to a point where she was getting like, you know, in the meeting, she was saying things like, they think we're all stupid. They think we're all stupid. You know, she was just coming out with that stuff, and she was able to more coherently put together, oh yeah, and this happened, and this happened, and this happened, and then my landlord said this, and then they said this, and these are the people who've said it to me, you know. And you could just sort of see this progression and how it was helping her actually being there in the assembly. Yeah, these assemblies just continue to be the best thing that we've done as a union. You know, so stay tuned. I will update you every month as we have them, because I will be going to every single one, because I think they're very, very important. So yeah, just sort of like, you know, Red Planet was right. We were right when we did our episode about assemblies, and we should say it.
And we'll keep being right, and everyone should listen to us because we're the only people you should listen to, and ignore everyone else. That's right.
It's true. It's true.
We know how to do the revolution, and nobody else does.
We do. We do. Speaking of knowing how to do the revolution, I know someone who knows how to do the revolution. It's Tim. What's the most base thing you did this week?
Ooh, yeah. There's been, I can't go into too much, but there's been recently we did an episode about a lot of the kind of policies that the government down here has been getting up to recently, kind of like this distinctly anti-Maori set of like legislation and stuff like that they're trying to push through. And since we did that episode, they've actually done a lot more, which I'll get into in the news section in a little bit. But there has been it's a little bit of organizing going on, a little bit of stuff happening. There's been some actions planned for today as well, but there's some other stuff coming that is still in the planning phases, but it's happening. We'll get back into like what the government has done and the responses to it in the news section. I think I've got a solid little section in there for that. But before then, Soph, what about yourself?
Yeah, the most base thing I did this week was probably enter into the Olympic women's boxing tournament, pretending to be a biological female, and then I punched a cop so hard that she cried and shit herself.
That's right. That was you, wasn't it?
Pretending
that was
to
me,
be
yeah.
a biological female
yes.
when all the time you were a cyborg female.
No, it's been a very care-focused week. I actually had a friend and comrade over for dinner on Monday, and she met my girlfriend. That was nice, and I cooked for them both, and she's just been having a really rough time lately. And you know, like a small part of that, but not a nothing part of that, is that she's been kind of doing stuff that's helping me out and kind of sticking up for me with some people. And but like she's really overstretched and really like just burnt out, and so like just like did stuff to take care of her and make sure she had like a gentle, lovely evening and cooked her dinner. And then the next morning, my friend who I talked about doing police station support for a few months ago now, was it a couple of months ago? I think so. Basically the next morning we were gonna go with her to back to the police station to hear if she was being charged, but she found out that she was not being charged, but they were going to extend her bail to October, which is quite frustrating because, like, I mean, firstly, it just means she's still on bail, and secondly, like they could keep doing it. They could do it up to 3 times, and it's like with no further evidence having emerged, they might just do that because like it's a way that they can try to discourage people from going to protests, and that's what they want. But so instead of going to the police station, we just hung out and just like, you know, be there for her. Like I say, a very care-focused week. And earlier today, I went down to the harm reduction hub. So people who tuned in last week and saw the episode we did with Sina, I went to visit the harm reduction hub when it was open today, and just checked out the space. And I'll post a picture in the Red Planet Patreon Discord. Little sneak Patreon plug there. And and then you can see it. But it's a lovely space, and I'm really excited about it. Yeah.
Awesome, cool. All right. So we want to know what base things you've been doing. If you have something equally based that you've done, or actually like some of you out there get up to some super based, far more based stuff than I've been up to. But if you have, you can message us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, or send an email to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout it out in a later episode. But for now, let's get into the news. Sophie, why don't you tell us what's been going on? Yeah, what's been happening with the far right lately?
With the Olympics, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
my
no,
story. This is my
one of the many
shining.
far right.
This is my moment to
situations.
shine. I want to keep on comparing this to. I mean, I hope that people are already familiar enough with this, but like, it's just. I keep on joking with friends. It's like I go on Hot Ones and I take the first bite of chicken tender with some hot sauce, and then I'm immediately struck in my mind and my whole body with just the sensation that I'm white. I'm just so white. I'm a fragile, tiny white baby. And it's like no hot sauce that I've ever experienced in my entire life. And I just storm off accusing everyone else of having a biological advantage. It's just, it's like her job is to be a boxer and then her other job is to be a cop, like two jobs where you get punched in the face. And she's like, this is all right. I'll tell the story. Right. So far right throws a global splat pants tantrum after Olympic women's boxing match. This week saw a controversy around the Olympics women's boxing after part-time police officer and full-time crybaby Angela Carini quit her match with the Algerian athlete Yamane Khalif after just 2 punches and 46 seconds of fight. Carini, 25, claimed that her opponent hit harder than any punch she had ever received, despite being an officer in Polizia di Stato and a competitive boxer. This immediately prompted right-wing commentators from J.K. Rowling and Elon Musk to Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni to leap to her defense by claiming that Khalif is actually a man claiming to be a woman. Before I even carry on with this, I just want to point out that, like, when it comes to trans people in sports, which this story isn't even, right? Like, we'll get to it in a second. Like, this is not a trans people in sports story at all, but that's like the discourse that's being used to do racism, by the way. But like, boxing is such a terrible example to focus on. Like, I know that like from the transphobe perspective, it's like, this is a man beating up a woman. And so it's like, they think it's the best example for them to focus on.
Yeah.
But boxing is sorted by weight class. Like, you just don't have people who are like significantly different. Like you group people together as like the same size. And like, if someone, so my sister has done some competitive boxing before, and like, so she's talked to me a bunch about this. Like, if someone had a testosterone puberty and they had the argument is always about having denser bones, right? Because you weigh in and you're in weight classes, there would just be a trade-off, right? Like, it wouldn't just be like you're exactly the same, only one of you has harder bones so can hit harder. Actually, like, if you're the same weight and one of you has denser bones, then you have less muscle. Like, there's actually a trade-off there. I think that's really interesting and would be one of the things that would be interesting to explore in the differences between people's bodies that I guess like sports and athletic striving and comparison and competition is meant to be all about. But like, fuck me, I guess apparently not. It's about being all completely identical, being 5'6" and the color of mayonnaise, and trying your best and then finding out which West European country is the best one and deserves the most medals. Okay. Yeah. It's already making me exhausted, this story. Okay, so misinformation here seems to have played its usual game of telephone, from the initial match to the reemergence of information that Khalif had previously failed an unspecified gender eligibility test, which, like, just sounds like some fucking calipers shit. Anyway, by the International Boxing Association. On to the idea that Khalif may be intersex, to the claim that she is a transgender woman hiding her status, made by Musk, Rowling, and others. This drama shows yet again how the current fever pitch of anti-trans fear-mongering has produced a climate in which it is not only that anything said about trans women in the public eye is repeated uncritically and warped into the worst possible version of itself, which was already the case, but that the same can be done to any marginalized woman, provided they are first accused of being trans. Outlets sympathetic to this gibberish have reported with wide-eyed credulity at Carini's white woman tears. Time magazine, don't read the Time magazine article. It's awful. But they said shit like this. Afterward, a still tearful Carini said she quit because of the pain from Khalif's opening punches, adding that her nose bled afterwards, and giving details such as, "My brother and my father taught me boxing." Carini said, "I owe everything to them," while barely discussing Khalif, except to say that she had her gender questioned in the past, right? Like this is it's so clear like whose side they're on, and it would be interesting. It would be kind of interesting if they went into detail about this gender eligibility test, because what Time and other news sources failed to include was that the IBA, International Boxing Association, is Russian-led and is infamous for claims of mismanagement and corruption and financial mismanagement, and only made the claim that Khalif had XY chromosomes after she beat a Russian boxer so they could have her disqualified. And then when people were like, okay, show us the test then, like show us the evidence, like she has XY chromosomes, and they were like, nah, don't worry about it. Source, just trust me, bro.
I was going to say another thing about this as well is that so the IBA kind of lost the job not long after this, and so there was the opportunity for Aman to appeal the decision, which she began but then stopped. Which when you stop an appeal, sorry, in this case, when you stop an appeal like that, it means that the results become kind of like final, and then you can't appeal. So people are like, why did she, like not continue with the appeal then? And it's because the IBA was basically like it was like falling apart. It was not like, it's no longer the governing body. So, she was like, well, this is going to be this big expensive thing to carry on with this. And, the whole team were just like, it's not actually worth doing this because their rulings just kind of carry no weight anymore or whatever. But a lot of people are, doing that. They're saying like, well, why did she stop appealing it, and all this kind of stuff. But I just noticed that not many people are kind of, like there was a big discussion at the time, like it was in like the new, like the boxing news and stuff about like, is she going to appeal it? Is she not? And all that kind of stuff. Like those discussions have already been had. It's like,
yeah, of course. I mean, it's just like to see like far right pundits and like obsessed transphobes like J.K. Rowling, and also just like kind of like public idiots like fucking Logan Paul or whatever, who just like have no expertise in anything but are required to comment because I guess he did a boxing one time, like just like all going like, she's so muscular and look at her, like, like her angular chin or whatever shit they're like, I don't care to look that deeply into the shit they're saying, but like, listing all these features, and like people are pointing out all the time that like when transphobes say like this feature that trans women have means you can't be a woman, you can tell because you see this feature, it's always just like that's just a feature that racialized women have. But also just like in this specific case, it's just like you are talking about competitive boxers. Like when you're talking about like being like really shredded and having like big shoulders and shit, it's just like she's the competitive boxer. Like
I don't know if anyone, well, if you've touched on this already, because I was just away sorting my tea out, but I saw a tweet that said that J.K. Rowling is just kind of like one glass of gin away from saying only white women can be women, and she fucking definitely thinks that.
Yeah, it has been wild. I mean, there have been there have been other athletes have been kind of like caught the splash damage of this, having the eye of the transvestigators turned towards the Olympics. Like there's like Katie Ledecky, the American swimmer, who is like a once in a lifetime kind of like amazing athlete who has just been like smashing like records for years, has a stack of medals already, and they're like, look at her muscular frame, like look how like how slim and like ripped she is. And it's like, like no shit, like look at her record. Like do you think that do you think you can perform at this level without being like absolutely shredded? You know,
Yeah.
like and there's a certain body type that lends itself well to swimming and all this kind of stuff. But yeah, the stuff
Yeah.
it's been pretty disgusting to see
Yeah.
even, you know, mainstream celebrities and politicians kind of doing this kind of stuff.
Mm.
But
Yeah, I mean, as I put
yeah,
it in the notes here, like all this is served to show that race science is alive and well in the Olympics,
yeah,
wearing the hat and glasses of gender critical transphobia. As some small silver lining, the IOC has defended Khalif and Taiwanese Lin Yuting, who also had her gender interrogated by the IBA and the far right, saying that both of them were previously, quote, suddenly disqualified without any due process and ruling them fit to compete. So solidarity from Red Planet to the racialized women having their gender inspected on the international stage by freaks and bigots. And we hope that Italian anti-fascists learn to hit harder so the police can receive proper training in future. Tim, why don't you tell me what's going on around you?
Yeah, so what I was talking about a little bit earlier this morning was that so we were talking about a lot of the policy that that our current New Zealand coalition government has been putting through that have been widely received pretty terribly by Maori. It's kind of like it's almost as if they got in and immediately started like firing through under urgency a lot of bills that like directly attack things that we've kind of fought pretty hard for through like, you know, like affirmative action and all that kind of stuff. So we have a forum called the Iwi Chairs Forum, which is basically like an Iwi is like a large tribe or like alliance of tribes, and so all of the chairs, like all of the board members from each tribe, all get together, have this big forum hui kind of situation with government ministers and all this kind of stuff. And so that was just the other day, and they were talking about there's been a lot of stuff happening since the episode that we did, but there's been a whole situation with like the youth boot camps that are putting children into state care in these kind of military style boot camps and stuff. But there has also been a while back we had, well, this is like a few years back now when I was younger, there was a foreshore and seabed bill that passed, which basically was one of the biggest land grabs in, you know, like single land grabs in New Zealand history, where the government basically took the land that belonged to Maori around the sea, like, you know, like any like beaches and stuff like that. And so there was like a lot of back and forth and bargaining and like an agreement, and like it was like a huge period of like gigantic protests, like a very you know, like a pivotal moment in history. But it was, yeah, it was essentially just this gigantic land grab. And but part of the agreement was that there would be iwi consultation on you know, like if there was ever to be any kind of you know, like development or anything like that. This is like simplifying it a lot, but basically the current government wants to strip that back. They're kind of doing a Foreshore and Seabed Act 2.0 they're overturning the Foreshore and Seabed Act and replacing it with a bill called the MACA. And that means that it'll make them a lot easier to open up the foreshore and seabed for exploitation by like mining and drilling and all this kind of stuff. Basically removing any right for local Maori, like who have, you know, a presence in the area to kind of consult or contest any of these things, which goes in line with a lot of the government's current policies about kind of fast tracking extractive industries and selling it off to like overseas investors and all this kind of stuff. So during this forum, so leaders from Ngāpuhi, which is one of the tribes that I'm from, and Ngāti Manuhiri, which is another big one, and also I also heard that, I don't have it in my notes here, but I think it was Te Rororo, they also walked out. And so they basically in protest they got up and just left, because they had, the night before, a lot of the chairs had agreed that all passed a resolution together that they were going to they were they were basically disagreeing with what the government was doing and that they were going to refuse to deal with them on certain things. And then that morning they got told, actually, no, we're not going to do that. And then so representatives from these tribes were actually like, okay, fuck it, we're out then, and got up and left. And I did see videos from people that stayed, confronting the ministers about certain things. So it's not that the people that stayed were, felt anyway like in line with the government or anything like that. They were still equally confrontational, but like there's like a thing in it's like a traditional Maori thing like that, to get up and just to leave like that is like in the middle of someone's like address or something like that, is kind of like it's got like a lot of weight to it. So yeah, it's because of foreshore and seabed thing, but it's also about the youth camps thing. There's a program that that Ngāpuhi run called Mahuru that's been going for a long time, and it's basically what they try to do is, if a child is going into state care or like some kind of program for like troubled or even just like abandoned kids or whatever like that, they try and scoop them up with this program, and it's like a tribal led program that kind of tries to keep them like connected to their culture and kind of engaged, and even when they can, placed within homes that are like somewhat kind of like close to like where they grow up. It's just like a very like kind of community focused sort of thing. And so they're saying that we don't want any more kids to go into state care. We want to be able to take care of our own kind of children. And they already have a bunch in the program, but they want, instead of doing that, they're like, no, we should be funding these programs, because they're far more successful. So they walked out because of the government refusing to listen on those things, and they've planned, there's a hikoi, which is kind of like a protest march from Kaikohi. So that's it's not like a big city, but it's kind of central to where Ngāpuhi is kind of like our land, like the far north. That's like one of the historic areas where Ngāpuhi was kind of like focused. So and then also down in Wellington, where the capital is, where we have Parliament, there's going to be a meeting there. Nothing up here in Auckland that I'm aware of at this point. But yeah, so there's going to be some actions, and they're going to present some stuff to the government today, to kind of obviously say that they're unhappy with the direction that it's going, and this is the way that we want to go. And I'm hoping that it's like, I don't have any faith that the current coalition government is going to like turn around and be like, oh yeah, actually we should listen to these people that we've been fucking over. As like, I mean, I was going to say as if it's a job, but it literally is their job. But I would like to see, like, I think doing things like this recently there has been a lot of public support outside of Maori. Like a lot of people are starting to be like, hey, actually, yeah, like something is going on here. So yeah, I guess we'll probably follow up with that in the news next week. Mule, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on with Palestine action?
Yeah, so it's been obviously a while for a while that Palestine Action have been doing more and more actions. These actions are heating up throughout the summer as the ICJ ruling came in. I think it was about a month ago now, giving them more and more license and mandate to do this. This kind of action, smashing up weapons factories, as we spoke about on the show briefly last week. Recently, they have done such things as covering Somerset Council in red paint. So this is another sort of targeted divestment action in terms of addressing the council in Somerset, trying to get them to divest from providing Elbit. I think they give them the lease to actually to rent their factory on or whatever. Like they own the land that the factory is on or whatever, and so they're basically saying, right, you've got to get them out because they're war criminals. So just fantastic stuff from Palestine Action as always. I guess like the purpose of mentioning Palestine Action in this news story is to kind of like get people ready for this like awful bit, because we're going to talk now about what is going on actually in Israel. So Israel appears to be like imploding in real time, which is really funny, and it's happening a lot faster than I expected. And it seems to have kicked off because some soldiers have been told that they're not allowed to rape Palestinian prisoners. That is genuine. I'm not making that up. There has been, because possibly of the scrutiny now, the added scrutiny of Israeli Defense Force fighters, because of the ICJ ruling, the Israeli government actually said, right, well, you know, you can't really be raping any Palestinian prisoners anymore, like not out loud anyway, certainly. So we're gonna have to put you in detention and question you. I guess we'll pretend. And even though nothing has happened, they've been temporarily decommissioned. Thousands of vile fascist scum have been rioting against the government, demanding their release, and this has been being discussed in the Knesset in Israel, in just the most vile way possible. For example, a lawmaker called Hanok Milvitsky was asked if he defended the alleged abuse and whether it was legitimate, and he said, quote, "To insert a stick into a person's rectum? Yes. If he is a Nukba, which means Hamas militant, everything is legitimate to do, everything." And that is a quote.
It's just like it strains credulity, but it's like because we had all of this shit about like Hamas are raping every person they see, like all this shit that was laundered through like the New York Times and all this like after October 7th, and now it's just like, no, this is just like I mean, again, it's just like institutionalized sexual violence is a weapon of patriarchy and white supremacy and American imperialism, capitalism, and colonialism. Like they're all hand in hand isn't even the right metaphor. It's just like they're limbs of the same body, right? And it's just like they're so of course Israel just has like a fucking
an extreme
words.
obsession with rape is what I would call it. Like, and
it's
that
like,
is projection.
It's pathological, right? Like it's like I mean, and a lot of people actually have written about this, and I mean, we've even seen there have been Israeli writers. Like there was one professor who has for years written about how they think that sexual violence is you know, like one of the best deterrents for Hamas militants, you know, like it's like, which is just like, it's deranged. There's so much going on here, like, and it tells you so much about where they're at, the dehumanization of, you know, like Palestinians. And it's just like, it's one of those things that you read about and it's like, surely when they say like, you know, like rape or sexual violence, they can't mean that that's what they're rioting for, right? But it's the more you read about it, it's like, no, it's absolutely, it's worse. It's worse than what
it's much worse than
expect.
that. Yeah, they're rioting for the right of the IDF soldiers to be able to do that widespread abuse. It's not just like one situation that they're mad about. They're mad about the fact that their false consciousness is being attacked because in their false consciousness, Arabs are less than humans, and therefore you can do anything you like to them, right?
Yeah.
Well,
and
that's
this
the
idea
thing,
of a
it's like-
deterrent, this idea of a deterrent even is just like deterrent from fighting back against complete and total extermination. Like when you think about the October 7th Hamas fighters who like I'm not gonna, you know what? I'm not gonna bother distinguishing a complete endorsement of Hamas in this case. Fucking fuck off. Like the Hamas fighters on October 7th who like went into Israel and they went on their family's land, the land of their immediate ancestors, of their parents and grandparents and great grandparents that was stolen from them in recent generations in their lifetimes, right? And they were able to just be on their family's land, just touch it, right? Just be there and set foot on it for like a few hours until they were mown down or captured like this, and then horribly tortured, and just like the determination to just like touch that land and be there again. because like the alternative is just being in an open air prison until you are slowly like squeezed until like there are none of you left. And it's just the idea of like deterring people from fighting back against this. Like, you're never going to deter people from, like, there were you just can't not reach for Holocaust metaphors, like with what Israel does. Like, but there were resistances in concentration camps. There were people in the worst possible conditions still fighting back, because like that's people, right? Like they will always, you can't just like make them just completely meek and compliant with their own total annihilation.
Yeah, they I think it should also be mentioned at this point, like reiterated anyway, that there has been no evidence of weaponized sexual violence on October the 7th from any Palestinians that came out. In fact, all reports of Palestinians and just people that we know of Palestine, like who are Palestinian, who talk about Palestine and how they think of women, like they treat women like queens, etc. At least Hamas do when they, when they've taken hostages. Like literally 2 of the hostages said they treat women like queens. So there's been no evidence. Even a UN report as well has said that there's no evidence at all of sexual violence on October the 7th, and it is always projection, like the way that they say Hamas uses human shields. Well, actually Israel does that. Hamas weaponizes sexual violence. Well, actually Israel does that. It is just always projection all the time. But solidarity is always to the Palestinians resisting, their inhuman oppressors. Palestine will be free within our lifetime. I'm absolutely certain of it. And I hope Israel eats itself soon. Sophie, talk to us about all the fashy, sweaty gammons.
So it's kicking off in the UK this week. I'll be kind of two-handing this story with Donkus Mule, because like he's up in the part of the country where this is happening, has much more immediate exposure to it. He's our man on the ground. But far-right rioting and protests in north of England met by anti-fascist resistance and community repair efforts after children stabbed. So first, we have to understand there's the initial story. What happened here is that 3 girls aged 6, 7, and 9 were stabbed by a 17-year-old in Southport this week. So there's been rioting after misinformation spread on social media claimed the attacker was a Muslim who entered the country on a small boat, like via small boat channel crossing. So like this, I'm using this specific wording because this is a big like buzzword, key phrase in the right-wing British media at the moment. Small boat channel crossings. It's like the stuff that the Conservative government and now new Labour government are like hyper-focused on. What can we do about small boat channel crossings? And none of it has anything the fuck to do with this 17-year-old who we can't say for sure. We don't know right now, but it seems like maybe was having some kind of mental health crisis. There's nothing that justifies going and murdering a bunch of children, nothing at all, but there's no evidence currently of any kind of connection to political extremism, let alone Islam specifically. According to the first post at the first day of his trial, the prosecution told the court he had been, quote, unwilling to leave the house and communicate with family for a period of time. So there has been widespread rioting by the far right, because these misinformation claims have focused on the idea that it's a Muslim who has entered the country illegally, and therefore it's the perfect opportunity for the far right to kick off and basically attack refugees, asylum seekers, immigrants, and places where the state is holding and processing them. 147 people were arrested. I'm going to back up a second. The attacker has been clarified, was born in Cardiff, Wales, to 2 Rwandan parents, but was born in Wales, and there is no evidence that he's a Muslim. Right. 147 people were arrested on Saturday, 3rd of August, as far-right riots spread across major urban centres in the north, including Manchester, Liverpool, Hull, and Stoke, although there have been more riots around the country today and yesterday. On Sunday 4th, that's today, masked rioters gathered outside of a hotel in Manvers, South Yorkshire, and fought with police, while a group in Rotherham set fire to a hotel where the state is basically where there are asylum seekers staying in this hotel while they're waiting to be resettled. Mule, what have you seen of stuff in Manchester?
So yeah, basically, Manchester, as always, is extremely anti-fascist, and the majority of people who came in were quite clearly from outside boroughs. And I'm not saying that there's no racists in Manchester. That's completely absurd. There are certainly racists in Manchester, but when it comes to actual card-carrying fascists who want to, genuinely do harm to people, very thin on the ground. There was, I think, a maximum of 209 people that someone said, and then the numbers sort of decreased throughout the day. Obviously, there was a counter demo. Now, the counter demo was supposedly organised by Stand Up to Racism, and if you don't know who Stand Up to Racism are, they've got a really good name. But they are really a front for the Socialist Workers' Party. If you don't know who the Socialist Workers' Party are, they're the people who protected a guy who raped loads of women, abused his position of power within the organisation to abuse women. And they made apologies for him and hid him and all that kind of stuff. And, even aside from all of that stuff, they just co-opt protests. So what they did was, instead of staying there the entire day, which is really what you're supposed to do. Like, when you do an anti-fascist protest, you're supposed to stay there until the fascists go, right? That is what an anti-fascist protest is supposed to be. But they left because there seemed to be this unspoken idea that we just need to protect the Palestine protest. We just need to protect Trans Pride, because Trans Pride was also happening yesterday in Manchester, and also, as every week, there's a Palestine march. Now, that was a kind of an unspoken thing. And because of that meant that the fascists were left with their mates, the police, and that's when things really kicked off, because they assaulted a black guy who was just knocking around, and they just started questioning, "Are you English, bro? Are you English?" And then there's the video, you might have seen it on Instagram, he gets chinned and then taken to the ground, and then the cops chin him as well and arrest him. He was freed later on, but it's the sort of principle, right? The whole situation. And then later on, I was out and about for most of the day. I was doing the housing assembly, like I said, and then I came into town and I did a sweep of town just to see if there was any people around, and I did quite a fair bit of a sweep. I was really tired, but I went round the city to see if I could see any sort of big groups of fascists or anything, and then I ended up back in the gay village to see some of my friends who are drag queens, drag artists and stuff like that. And literally just as I got there were cops on, like, with fash on the ground, like kneeling on them and stuff. And I said, "What's happened?" And she said, "Oh, they've just tried to smash up the leather bar. It's a place called Rem Bar, and they just tried to smash it up, but they forgot that, like, queers actually do fight back, and the cops were just, like, knocking around waiting for something like that to happen, and so they all came and got battered, and then the young uns got off, but the older, sort of, like, more sluggish fash, they got arrested. So yeah, that's how that went down."
Nice one. Thanks for a report from Manchester. So far-right public figures have engaged with the news on various platforms. Tommy Robinson, Nigel Farage, Andrew Tate, the usual suspects inciting violence. Among them, Tommy Robinson, founder and leader of the English Defence League, which has been present in significant numbers throughout the riots. But as Mule was saying, there's been a large anti-fascist presence. This is the stuff that will not be widely reported on, and it's really, really, really important that we understand this. The cops show up when they fucking show up, and it's anti-fascist community organizing that actually stops this stuff and keeps people safe, as well as community organizing that does the cleanup afterwards. I don't know if people saw the video going around on social media of, I think it was in Southport, or it was either Southport or Sunderland, a local bricklayer who is just working super fast to do repairs to a mosque that was attacked by the far right. The BBC reports about 300 people gathered in front of a mosque in Waterloo Road in Middlesbrough to guard it while police blocked off nearby streets. One resident told the PA news agency, quote, we're going to be paying for this, and for what? This has got nothing to do with 3 little girls that have lost their lives. They've used it to cause utter mayhem on our streets." End quote. A person was seen being stretchered into an ambulance after an incident at the Swatters Car pub. footage on social media has shown various Nazis getting their shit kicked in, as well as local community members across the country cleaning up the mess and damage caused by the rioters. Reporting in the establishment press has been talking about one thing down south, which is in Weymouth. They've been describing it as 400 anti-immigration and anti-racist protesters, which is just like the total number of, like, it is a numbers game. It matters. It matters that the actual fact is there are far more anti-racist, anti-fascist protesters than there are fash, and that seems to be the case throughout. And it's just places where the fash are getting together and doing the damage they can before people fight back against them. But everyone fucking hates fascists is the thing. In response to all of this, Prime Minister Keir Starmer has made a public statement warning rioters they will, quote, regret it. And he's announced a new violent disorder unit this week. So I'm sure that will make us all really safe. And Tim, why don't you tell us about Bangladesh, where people are rioting against the government?
Yeah, wow. So at least 91 people have now been killed in Bangladesh amid escalating clashes between police and anti-government protesters, with a total of over 270 deaths since the protests began just in July. The protests, which began as a student-led movement against civil service job quotas, have transformed into a broader anti-government campaign demanding the resignation of Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina. Students have been protesting against attempts to reinstate quotas in civil service jobs for relatives of veterans from the country's war for independence from Pakistan in 1971 for more than 3 weeks. A third of public sector jobs had been set aside for them, but on the 21st of July, the Supreme Court ruled just 5% of the roles could be reserved. The student movement believes the system is discriminatory and has demanded recruitment based on merit. So it's like this weird thing, right, where it's like they've set aside, it like reminds me of Starship Troopers, right, where it's like, oh, you go into the military and then you get, like special rights or whatever. But the interesting thing about this one is that it's for relatives of veterans as well, which is like, I don't know, very, very strange. But yeah, so the students are basically like, they started off by being like, man, like, there's not enough jobs for everyone. Like, why are we reserving these for, the families of veterans and all this kind of stuff? But then it's bloomed into this just general kind of anti-government kind of movement. So yeah, police and government supporters have used live ammunition, tear gas, and rubber bullets against protesters, and authorities have detained around 10,000 people in the current crackdown. A nationwide curfew is in effect, and mobile internet access has been suspended in Dhaka. Violent incidents have occurred in multiple cities, turning parts of the capital into battlegrounds. Protesters have called for non-cooperation. So they're urging people not to pay taxes and utility bills and not show up for work on Sunday, which is a working day in Bangladesh. Offices, banks, and factories opened, but commuters in Dhaka and other cities face challenges getting to work. So we want the government to resign, Jaharul Islam, a restaurant worker in Dhaka, told Al Jazeera. Dhaka-based political analyst Zahid Rahman said that the government would be unlikely to resign without bloodshed. For the past 2 days, peaceful gatherings and demonstrations have taken place across the country demanding the government's resignation, Rahman said, explaining that the protests were peaceful because of the absence of Awami League activists on the street. However, once the ruling party's activists went to confront the protesters, they used guns and violence to quell a popular uprising in front of the world, Rahman said. So yeah, so when he's referring to activists, he's talking about the ruling party's activists. So basically like, protesters on the side of the government and the police and all that kind of stuff. So that's when things became violent. Before that, it was non-violent, and then when the pro-government forces met them, that's when all the guns and stuff came out. But yeah, so still very much developing in the time since, we got one story, like one news article last night I looked at, and then another one this morning, and like the death toll had gone up by about like 20 something. So it's like still very active it's still developing. I guess we'll see how it goes. The Sunday that they were calling for non-cooperation is today there now, I think. So I guess by next week we'll probably have some update on how that goes. Mule, what about what's happening with the junior doctors?
So this is just a really quick one, and I'm glad that it's quick because we started a bit late and we're running out of time before our guest gets here. So just a real quick one to talk about the junior doctors in the UK. They have won the 22% pay rise that they were asking for in their new contracts that has been what they've been striking about for a long time now. I think they've been striking for at least 6 months, probably even more. I think it might even be close to a year now. But you know, it's the same old story. Strikes work. Join a union. You can get a 22% pay rise. You could not just get that. You could change the entire world. Like, think about what they could do for us if they're willing to give us a bit more dough. We could win so much more. So yeah, just a quick reminder: strikes work. Join a union. Build dual power. That's what this show's about. Go do it now. We told you to do it in the first episode. Please go and do it. But Soph, why don't you tell us about the sort of victory, but not really, for the environmental activists trying to look after Stonehenge?
Yeah, absolutely. It all plugs into the model that we're working on in Red Planet, which is the model of dual power. We recently talked about assemblies as a more like small part of our model of how revolution is done and what people are going to be doing, but like building dual power is the name of the game, and like building community structures that make people safe is going to be so important, especially as this week Britain's new finance minister Rachel Reeves declared the government would be scrapping huge amounts of public spending due to budget shortfalls after a re-evaluation of the post-Tory state of the UK's finances. In a statement to the press, she referred to Britain as broke and broken. And so the small silver lining here is that one of the projects being scrapped by the Labour government is the £1.7 billion tunnel that was planned to pass under the hills that historic Stonehenge sits on. The tunnel has been opposed by local activists in occupation for years, and although the reason for the cancellation isn't a cause for celebration, this does come as a relief to British environmentalists of the Stonehenge Heritage Action Group and others who've been protesting this. So that's cool, and it's cool that the tunnel's been scrapped. It sucks shit that all the public spending is being scrapped. What I'm saying about this linking into our model is that, yeah, if the government's just going to give up on poor people, we're going to have to organize and maybe also do things like a general strike, which would be, what's the phrase? A heart attack in the body of capitalism, right?
Hell yeah.
To force them to fucking give us more, give us all that we deserve. Quick reminder that Red Planet is made possible by the support of our patrons. So go to patreon.com/red_planet, various tiers that you can support us on. We'll tell you more at the end of the show. And on to the main segment.
During times of doubt, fear, and rising fascism, it's always good to take hope from historical wins against the far right. And even though they may not be the first thing leftists in the West think of when you say the word fascism, ISIS were certainly some of the worst of them. Joining us today is someone who literally fought with his comrades to ultimately defeat them.
Coming to Rojava was like a kind of going to a place to find hope.
I came to the revolution because I could. Because they asked for help and I was able to do it.
This is the frontest line of RAC operation.
It is objectively a just war.
It's not just women with guns. the far larger evolution is happening in the civilian life.
Evjinin kahaya noha dibin deslatları zamanda riveberia avakırna şöre şeydikil.
Μαθαίνεις το θάνατο. Μαθαίνεις το θάνατο.
In Raqqa, there were just mines everywhere.
There's very few things that we should be willing to die for. Actual liberation of people is certainly one of them.
Back in the school, huh?
So a very warm Red Planet welcome to internationalist, anarchist and filmmaker Alexis Daloumis. Alexis, would you like to introduce yourself to our wonderful audience?
Yeah. Hello there, everybody, and thanks you guys for having me. My name is Alexis Daloumis. It's not precisely my legal name, but it's the name I use to sign my films and other part of my work. I'm a filmmaker, totally independent filmmaker, and also a reporter of sorts. I write articles in English by a different name, that is, to be honest. And I do like kind of photo video journalism, mostly demos at this point, a few other things here and there. I'm on every social media, pretty much every social media platform out there, as I was advised and trained to be quite recently, because I didn't grow up with this shit. And yeah, and anyone who wants to follow my work, particularly if they enjoy Greek riot porn, they can find me in pretty much every platform out there.
We definitely have some people in the audience who like Greek riot porn. So yeah, obviously, like I think like the main thing of what we want to sort of discuss and talk to you about today is your absolutely phenomenal film, Belki Sibe. Is that how you say it?
Yes, Belki Sibe.
Yeah, Belki Sibe. It's all about how you and your comrades on your journey in the Internationalist Freedom Battalion in northeast Syria during the sort of 2016, 2017, 2018 revolution, fight against ISIS, also known as Daesh, and your documenting of all of that. I think probably like what our first question here is going to be is, and you do, I think, briefly talk about this in the film, maybe at the very start, but just for our audience, how did you get into internationalism, and would you like to give just a very brief primer for our audience?
Let me make just a quick couple of points. First, that Belki Sibe is Kurdish, and in fact, specifically Kurmanji, for maybe tomorrow. And I can get maybe a bit later more into that about like why this is the title of the film. And also that the film does not, like, the film takes place in two sets of dates. There is not 2018 in there, is 2016 and 17 is the main part of the war against Daesh, and that's kind of the main bulk of the film. But there's also like some sort of flash forwards. Let's just say what there's a brief flash forward after every chapter, because the film is divided in chapters. So from the late 2021, when I went back to northeast Syria to shoot a kind of update, like show the progress and whatnot. So, I mean, these are also like a couple of different questions here, because internationalism is part of our politics anyway. Like, I guess I have always been inclined and politically inclined towards internationalism. I've been privileged to speak fairly good English from a young age, and that is also, that also played a role for sure, I guess. I mean, by the way, technically I am British, but I am pretty much like I just have the part, like I'm culturally Greek, and Greek is my mother tongue. Like I had to learn English as a second language. But yeah, but this also helped me, you know, having to have a kind of internationalist perspective, and always like sort of liking to meet comrades from other places, you know, exchange and so on. Like so, given that and kind of, you know, having that as a cultural and political base, how I ended up is in Syria is like this, like. One thing that is also, I guess, a little bit different in Greece than many other places is that people here didn't first hear of PKK and the Kurdish movement in 2014 and the siege of Kobani. We've known PKK and all that for a very long time. But however, in this time, the siege of Kobani specifically and the Kurdish movement more generally gained some, you know, global attention and so on. And at that point, a close and old friend, first suggested, like kind of just floated the idea that we could maybe join this fight, which at the time was like a little bit unfounded. I was quite immersed in other things, and I found like that it was not very realistic at the time, as we didn't have any connection or anything. This is something I want to mention as well, but expand a little bit further on. But first to say how it actually happened. So there was a point in the summer of 2015 where there was, and this might sound, you know, a bit peculiar to people from around the world. There was a public meeting, like in the center of Athens, in Athens Polytechnic School, in like a university, which was basically a presentation of the founding of the International Freedom Battalion. Now, the International Freedom Battalion was effectively the creation of certain parties of the militant armed Turkish left. However, there was other people involved, and as you can see in the film, there's, you know, people speaking in English and mentioning various ethnicities, you know, and so on. But the driving force behind it was a particular section of the Turkish left. So representatives of those parties were present, as I think of the main party as well, the main Kurdish party. And it was also pretty much a call out for recruitment. Like a Greek anarchist comrade at some point pretty much like sort of spelled it out. He said, "We are calling for," not sure how to translate that, but it was like a little bit like very, 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 very thinly veiled, like just in a slightly more fancy way of saying this is a recruitment call, like. Which, and I say all this to make a point, because I have found in my, you know, in my discussions with people and in presenting the film and so on, that this is something that kind of surprises people often, because many people have a very different experience of that. For many people, it is an entirely individual journey, where they just see stuff online, you know, they kind of whatever. Watch videos or read articles, you know, and whatnot. And then, as somebody mentions in the film, you send an email to YPG International, you know, and so on. And then you wait if they answer back and so on and so forth. And some people even mention this in the film. And I have to tell you, I never emailed anybody. Like everything was arranged like pretty much face to face. So another, like a more middle ground, is like people who have some relations with some local Kurdish community organizers or something who are linked to politically active people, something, and then, but it is still something much more discreet and somewhat secretive. While this was, you know, a very public call out, like, okay, so we've founded a military unit, and you know, we need more fighters, you know, pretty much, and it happened in the dead center of Athens, in broad daylight. So that's how it started, you know, so in some way there was, how can I say, there was already people that were immersed in the movement before, were present already on the ground. There were strong links. Obviously, Greece is quite close to the Middle East. I often say it's kind of, in many ways, in different ways, it's kind of a European extension of the Middle East. Definitely in the sense of the presence of all sorts of organizations. Yeah, so you might say in some way, like, you know, the road was kind of paved, you know, at least to get in touch and make arrangements and so on. However, having said that, there was, I guess, you know, the road was paved up to a point. From then on, to actually get into Rojava back in those days, and every so often again, I think the situation right now, I think, is in fact pretty grim about that. It's always quite an ordeal to manage to enter into Rojava, and it can take, or exit for that matter, and can take a significant amount of time. So in our case, although I guess, yeah, the road was paved all the way to our borders, but we did have to wait 9 months to actually get there from when we first discussed it. And 4 of those months, which is something I will never forget, we were left with the instruction that we must be ready to leave within 2 days. Which, if you can contemplate for a second what that does to one's life.
Yeah.
And that was one of the worst periods of the whole affair, to be honest.
Worse than fighting ISIS. Worse than drinking boiler water, old boiler water and stuff.
Let's not do too many spoilers, man. I'm joking.
Crazy. Yeah, go ahead.
There you have it.
Yeah. So I wonder, because obviously, no, you are right. We should encourage our viewers to watch your film, because it is just, you know, it's a phenomenal watch. As I said in the intro, you know, if you're sort of scared or frightened of fascists, it's one of the most hopeful, and even scared of capitalism. Like, you know, it is one of the most hopeful sort of films out there in terms of like a really. Like, the Syrians, they were in such a fucked situation with ISIS, not just ISIS, but also like Turkey, and there were other pressures as well, obviously international pressures from other states and this, that, and the other. And just like, you know, the entire journey and what happened afterwards is just fantastic. It's really hopeful. So I think everybody should indeed watch it. But talk to us about, because obviously it's one thing being an internationalist and going to Syria and fighting in the revolution. But talk to us about like the actual, like the thought process of like filming it, because obviously that was an idea that you had when you went out there. You thought, right, I'm going to document this because you're already a journalist. You wanted to make sure this was really sort of like documented. And I can tell, like, obviously from your corrections from me before, you're very, very particular about actual reporting, like correct facts about what's happening and stuff. So talk us through like your thoughts of what the process kind of was, like how you formulated it in your mind before you went, and then the process as you were there.
Well, I mean, what I usually say is that it was like a very integral part of the plan and part of the motivation as well. Like, I certainly went there with a disposition to fight to fight ISIS, fight like both for the revolution, but also against ISIS. This is also something that kind of features in the film, especially by the Brits, by the way, like their perception of participating in this war and like kind of as anti-fascists. But it was also it was also certainly with the intention to make the film. Like, it's one of the fundamental reasons I undertook this this whole endeavor, like, to begin with. It was not, it didn't like occur along the way. It was the basic motivation from the very beginning.
Did you come up across any kind of like resistance to that? When you like presumably arrived with a bunch of camera gear and all that kind of stuff, were they like, this is gonna get in the way, or like you're gonna like this is dangerous, or was there anything like that?
Oh, I will get to that. Yes.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, so that was like I would even before that, I would say it was even a bit of an issue for even getting there, like for, as it is commonly kind of referred to, for the road. The road. The road is a common expression. It's like the road is open, the road is now closed, the road is messed up. But I know someone who just crossed, you know. So the road, you have to look for the road, and the road has all sorts of intricacies. And like I mentioned before, sometimes you have to wait, you know, and whatnot. So already, even for that part, even for getting this stuff across, even for traveling with this stuff, it was seen as a complication, particularly in the sense that it was electronic equipment, you know, and so on. Now, upon arriving, as the film also mentions, I guess we're inevitably going to make quite a few spoilers here. As the film also mentions, this was very, very, it was a rather insane decision, like being both a soldier at the front line and like a filmmaker making a film at the same time. Well, there's a reasons there are not many films like that. Like, I like to think that, you know, surely this film has some weaknesses, I would think objectively, but also it has like a sort of particular value in the sense exactly that it is a soldier's film, and you don't come across such a thing very often at all, because it is completely insane to do. It is very, very frustrating, very, very exhausting, and very difficult. And part of why it is difficult is because people's, you know, engagement with this and reaction to this varies from, you know, legitimate concerns to people being total assholes about it. I would sometimes.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the response to the film later on. I think that, like, because I think the unique part, and I'm sure my hosts agree, the unique part of Belki Sibe is that it quite clearly is a soldier's film. And it's a soldier's film in the best way, because it is, as one of your comrades says in the film, again, sorry, spoilers, but it is objectively a just war from every sort of angle that you look at it. And in that sense, it doesn't glorify war in the way that you might think something like that would. If it was an imperialist endeavor, if it was a colonization-based endeavor or something like this, it was a revolutionary endeavor, in fact. And that being the focus on it. And it isn't just the fighting. I mean, the fighting is obviously like incredibly gripping. It's real, it fucking happened, you know? It's like, you know, beyond comprehension for a lot of people. But also in the you know, the liberation of the people, and you see the people, like the response and the reaction to being liberated, like that you know, again, I don't want to spoil it, so I'm not going to say, but when you see the people's faces after, you know, Alexis and his comrades have literally liberated a city from ISIS, you know, they're joyous, like thanking them, like, because, you know, it's fucking ISIS. They were just like beheading people left, right, and center for no fucking reason. You know, sexual violence was rife, you know, forcing women to wear burqas everywhere, and still, even then, things worse for them. So that I think that is the beauty of it. And you know, it's a fantastic piece of I mean, it is art. The obviously it's an art form, making film, but it you know, obviously it's a documentary, but I would regard it as like a wonderful documentary piece of art. And yeah, like, sorry, I'm just kind of gushing at the moment. Do you know what I mean? Like, because I actually really love it. Like, because I met you, and also because I just want to mention this, I met Alexis at one of his showings, and immediately I was like, I've got to get you on Red Planet. And I remember when we were walking from the showing to the pub, and you were talking about the problems that you had in translating it. So maybe we should touch on that a little bit before, because I think it's important for people to know this was no small effort to make this film, not just in the filming of it, but yeah, tell us more about the translation and the editing and stuff.
Since you mentioned it, and I want to just squeeze something in, because you mentioned us meeting like in the UK, in Manchester, and I'm just trying to think if this could possibly be inappropriate, because it's technically not fully arranged yet. But anyway, I'll say it like this. I'll phrase it like this.
Okay, we'll cut all that out.
Chances are that I will be back in the UK with a screening at the London Anarchist Book Fair, and I'm trying to arrange more screenings around that time. So that would be around mid-October. Yeah, and I might even be back in Manchester, just so you know.
That would be wonderful.
If you're down in London, I'll try and catch that screening so we can hang out in person too.
That'd be great. That'd be great. Hopefully there would be more than one screening in London, but that's all like completely in process. So let's say it's like an exclusive or a scoop or something. Yeah.
Whoa! You heard it here first, everyone.
Knows that. You definitely heard this first here, because it's all,
holy shit.
It's all like completely in progress and and it might not even happen in the end, because you never know things, you know. But yes, well, there you go.
That's great. Thank you.
So translations, yes. Well, this film is, I guess, the primary language we can safely say is English, because there's plenty of interviews in English, and the voiceover narration is also in English. So roughly, I've never really like measured the minutes and seconds or whatever, but I think, you know, the biggest bulk of languages is pretty much certainly English. But from then on, there's 5 more languages, yeah, and quite a lot of Kurdish and Arabic. And that's the thing, which both are, especially Kurmanji, is something, you know, quite very specific to try and translate. Yeah, there's no vast market for Kurmanji translation, let me tell you. And even Arabic translation is a bit of a, you know, it's not the most commonplace thing in the world either. Like, it's kind of, you know,
lots of dialects as well, different dialects. Yeah.
Exactly. Arabic, that's a good point. Arabic is not really a unified language. There's massive differences between, you know, what people speak in Northwest Africa and like in the Middle East, you know. And from then on, there was also some considerable bits in French, Greek, and Turkish. So all of that created a massive, like a very impossible, like to work with, and very, very vast amount of material as well at the same time. So I came back with something that it wasn't just difficult and frustrating and complicated, like on the field and on the production part, but also the post-production was a total nightmare. And yes, and translations was a very big part of that, because imagine that we had to start, if you're gonna get to you know, to the nitty-gritty, like we had to start with some audio translations, like just to get through the material. In some cases, I had, when that was possible, by the way, because you also, you know, this is produced within a conflict zone and everything, and you're not even, it's not like I didn't rock up there like being with the Vice or something, and have like I was seen as a soldier who also has a camera, and it was kind of like, okay, it's not, what I mean. It's not. I didn't come with BBC or something.
Yeah. I noticed there was one scene in particular I remember seeing, I think from another soldier's head cam, that there was another soldier in front of them, and then I noticed that it was you, that this other soldier had turned, and then it clicked for me that it's just like, like this isn't a cameraman, this is real, like he's the soldier, like the soldier primarily, and is making a documentary while he's there. I thought that was like, yeah, I just remember that was a moment that really struck me, like, oh shit, he's there.
Thanks for making that point, because let me tell you, at the time it was, as I said before, like it was so frustrating and exhausting to keep both roles, because as I used to often say in my presentations before, and still today sometimes, like these two roles, like trying to combine and maintain these two roles, had also the element that they tended to undermine each other. Like people, like in many cases, people would see you as like not fully committed to either thing or something like this.
Yeah.
Hopefully I proved them all wrong.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some footage in there that proves them wrong.
So in some cases I had somebody kind of translating on the record, but you still have to understand that this is let me say this as well. I discovered in Rojava how relativized can the notion of speaking English be. Like in some cases, it took me by surprise what sometimes people can possibly mean when they say that someone speaks English.
Oh.
So that's not to say that anyone in specific in this, but also like meaning that those translations that were on the record, they were not always entirely usable. It was just to give a very, very basic idea of what he talked about.
We have something. We've been doing some filming in France, and we've done the first block of it. We're going to do the second block of it later this year for a documentary we're working on about the ZAD, the Notre Dame de l'Anzad, and like that rings very true. Like what it can mean when someone says that someone speaks English. Like we went for a bunch of interviews where it was like, it's okay, they speak English, and we got there and it's like they can understand like the times of day, like in English. It's not like, but luckily we had someone who was like sitting in the interviews and translating for us, like sort of helping things along.
And thankfully, French is not also the worst,
No, I was thinking that exactly. Like we have one language to translate from and to try and get that across, and not five. Like that's absolutely wild.
I'm glad to hear you're making a documentary about the ZAD.
Oh yeah, it's been in the works for a while.
Have you been?
No, I haven't.
I think it's everybody's dream to go. I know a few more people that have gone.
We may have met some people there who you may have known, but I don't want to get into that on the show, of course.
Yeah, let's not get into that. But I have occasionally met some people from there. Yeah.
I was going to say that it really struck home the combination of, like the people that had come from different cultures and languages there. There's like one scene that I really don't want to spoil because I think it's one of the my highlights from the film is when there's the soldiers and the guy comes upstairs and he's yelling at them and they're not exactly sure what he's saying, they kind of get the vibe, and then when they click and they understand, I think that is like one of the high points of the movie. But yeah, like this idea that it's like you're all there, you're on the same page, you know what you're doing together, and there's like this common language of like of what you're doing, but you don't necessarily understand exactly what people are saying at any given time. Was that hard to kind of navigate? Like, I guess, there would be times where people would be telling you, okay, we're going to do this, do that, or whatever. And, did you ever run into times where you weren't exactly sure what they were trying to tell you were supposed to do?
Let me take a moment. I will get back to the precise question, but since you brought this up, I can't not sort of comment on it, the scene. I'm not sure how to do this without making a bit of a spoiler. I guess it's also, the thing is, I'm used to making this, I've done this a lot, but not in this medium and not in this way. And it's usually a live Q&A.
Oh yeah.
In which case it also assumes that everybody who's listening has just seen the film.
Oh, right.
This is how I'm used to speaking about the film.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure how to make this out. Let's say, okay, so this was the scene that you just described.
It was my favorite scene as well. Tim and I were talking about it just before the interview.
Okay,
it's really
good
good
to
catch that on film.
I really like that we're having this dialogue right now. So wait for it. Because this is the scene that, like, not literally, by the way. I'm a bit not that much, but like it's the scene that at the time, almost made me want to put my Kalashnikov in my mouth. There is no original sound in that footage.
Oh, of course, because it's all overdub, isn't it?
Because the mic had died on me.
No.
Most crucial moment. And this is quite something to say about, like,
oh my God,
cinema and filmmaking. I was fucking devastated.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't begin to describe how angry I'm getting upset thinking about. I'm also, I get a bit easily angry sometimes, but I thought I was so desperate.
Of course.
Happened.
Because you can't do another take. Like, it's history unfolding in front of you. Like,
yeah,
Jesus.
It was so I was fully aware of how seminally important that scene was, and I just I couldn't. And I guess I had in the back of my head maybe whatever. And it's almost like once you get in that point, you just want to fucking break your head with your own hands, but. Once you get to the post-production, it's a whole different game. And I was kind of waiting for someone, like another contributor, to kind of, back me up on this somehow and tell me, it's going to be okay. And that was originally, and finally, that is in terms of the sound design, that was Alexandros Miaris. So a bit of a shout out to Alexandros Miaris, who also wrote the amazing original score of the film. Alexandros Miaris is also a comrade that I've known for many, many years and a personal friend. I actually met him on the occupation of the Greek embassy in London back in 2008.
Oh, incredible.
Yeah, that's how we met with Alexandros Miaris, the man who made the... I asked the crowd downstairs, outside of it. There were some people occupying the kind of the entrance and balcony of the embassy or whatever, and some people kind of with a bit of a distance, and the police had already arrived. And I just asked for someone to throw a pack of tobacco, which was at this point in England, many people still smoked straights, and it was a bit of a Greek thing to have tobacco, I guess, like rolling tobacco. And that's the moment we first met. Like, Alexandros just stood out of the crowd and threw a tobacco bag like a frisbee to me. And that's how we met.
Oh, that's cool as shit. I fucking love that.
Then.
That rocks.
and he's on tour now with Electric Litany. I don't know. He's a bit of a rock star, this guy, actually, which makes him hard to reach sometimes, but a great guy and a great musician. So finally, we met at some point, and he got a bit like, he reviewed the footage and everything. And said, "Listen, we can still use, like, we'll do something about this. We'll fix it. Like, somehow we'll make this work." And we did, and here we are today with a couple of you telling me that this was, you know, one of the scenes that whatever that was most that you found particularly engaging or whatever. That was a scene. That was a scene that was once thought to be destroyed.
And I'm gonna be real. Like, I'm a fucking film nerd, like an embarrassing film nerd. Do you know what I mean? You don't want to watch movies with me. I make them so unenjoyable, and like I didn't even fucking think about it. I was like, you know what? It's probably just because it was too loud or something. You know, I thought about something. I thought like, but whatever. It works so well. Yeah. Because of the commentary of the Conrad who is explaining what's happening, and you see it happen like as it's happening. It feels quite artistic, really. It felt like a choice, actually, and obviously it was a choice but actually it was more a choice in your eyes to save the footage.
Yeah, I mean, if anything, there was some directing in the sense that I did ask him after all this, knowing what I did ask him to describe what happened in this moment. You know, to have this, and we because I don't know how we would have saved it without that. But yeah, no, like, he's describing what was happening, and that's the main sound. And then you have some whatever atmospheric sound, kind of denoting that this is crucial or whatever, or that this is a pivotal moment or whatever, you know. And that's how it all works.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Honestly, absolutely incredible scene. Yeah, I guess like another thing that I wanted to sort of like drive home about the theme of the film. I think there are so many different themes, and obviously, like, you know, the main theme is internationalist anti-fascism and militant anti-fascism. But there is other stuff as well. There's also like the revolution in general. And one of the biggest things that I really liked and observed, it was your portrayal of everybody with the common goal coming together to actually, like, you know, unite and come against this bigger enemy. Because in sort of like the, you know, first bit of the film, everybody's talking about their ideologies, like where they stand, where they think they stand, what they believe, and obviously you have the Kurdish people who are also explaining their ideology and how things work in Kurdistan and Syria, you know, in general, northeast Syria. So I wonder, like, you know, was this you've been doing activism for a long time, you've been doing journalism for a long time. Was this something that was like very like hope inspiring for you, or was it something that you weren't expecting?
Journalism, not as long as activism, I'll have to say. Yes.
All right, just a clarification there. But yeah, was this like a sort of thing you weren't expecting, or was it like a really nice surprise, or how did you feel about it? And I guess, like, was it like a real sort of point that you wanted to drive home in the making of the film?
It was kind of one of the points, because also I guess we've mentioned already the IFB, but I guess I could explain a bit further for people who haven't watched the film, that a considerable amount of the film, by no means the whole film, but you know, de facto, like, given that I was mostly deployed in the IFB, like, a considerable amount of the film revolves around the IFB. And the IFB itself was to quite an extent almost a symbol of unity for I mean, it was a symbol of internationalism as well, or it became such, especially with some rather potent propaganda that we produced, which features in the film, by the way. but it was even before that. It was almost a symbol of unity for the Turkish left, which, let me tell you, has had in its history like a lot of problems with unity, and there are, there is a long history of infighting in the Turkish left, and of fragmentation, and for many people, both within the Turkish left, but also people who kind of follow the Turkish left, let's say, like from Europe and other places, this was a big deal for them. This was a big deal for everyone, like the IFB, even as an entity, the fact that it exists, further than what it does, how it is, the fact that it came together. Having said that, it's not like those parties, had sorted everything out and we're always cool with each other at every turn. But in this kind of condition, they created this battalion, and while to the extent that this battalion was in the front line, and it was most of the time in the very front line, then you get yourself in a situation where it really very, in a very profound sense, and where like it really stops to matter much, who is what. Like you have each other's life in your hands, and also you're in a very historical context. You understand that, look, like this is like, these are very big things happening here, like we're opening ways, and so on. So you feel like part of something big. So to some extent, again, especially when you're in the most tense situations, let's say, so to some extent you do get in a disposition of like, pushing a bit aside the things that separate us and try to focus more on what, on what unites us, and of course the enemy.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, I guess it's kind of self-selecting in a sense, but whenever you go and look at where leftists are actually getting shit done, it's really striking how like the really common problems that everyone knows, there are these common problems with the left: ideological purity, infighting, like how much they fall away. And I guess I'm saying it's self-selecting in that if you go to the place where people are actually getting the shit done, then by definition they've gotten over those problems. But it's always really striking to see how much like it's like, it's also when you go and see people getting the shit done, and then you see the like, it's a pluralistic thing. It was largely like a women's revolution. It was a feminist revolution. Like the fact that it's like, it's not just about just stopping ISIS, but it's socialist. You're talking like someone in one of the interviews, or maybe it's your voiceover, but either way, it's commented on in the film about like social ecology being important to the revolution as well. And just like the way that, like, I don't know, just whenever you go and find the people who are doing this incredible stuff, worries like, oh, what if people just care about this one thing and so they won't care about other stuff, that falls away. And you're like, no, actually everyone's piling in together to do every fucking incredible based thing all together, doing the coolest stuff. And as you said, you're on the this is a thing I really liked, the description of the frontist line. I liked that wording in the film, like you're on not just the front line but the frontist line. And when you go there to the frontist line, it's like,
I think that was the Vrim.
Yeah. Just like they're at the absolute edge, like all the coolest people, like absolutely fucking doing it. And it's not perfect. Like that's something that's touched on in the film, and hopefully we'll get to later in the interview as well. But just like that, all those problems fall away, and like infighting and factionalism, it has to be set aside, because like you say, like you have each other's lives in your hands, right?
Well, I can add a few things to that. I'm kind of contemplating what's okay. I'll say this. This is a small thing, just as a bit of maybe we can edit it out. I'll think about it. The point where you mentioned, someone mentions like about social, like the pillars of the revolution. This is again a little bit about cinema, about filmmaking in some way, and kind of building narrative. Documentary in particular, I guess. I remember saying to the or the first editor, there's two editors in the film, yeah, because it took so long that my original like sort of German editor had to move on to other things. So a Greek editor finished it. But it was her who suggested that I go back to Rojava, by the way. It's mentioned in the film as well. And I remember we were going through the material, and I tell her at some point, she said, I go through this bit. I think we really need this bit where he says like about the three pillars of the revolution. And I said, thank God for Devrim. I'm so glad he said that. And then Lou points out, well, you literally asked him to specifically say that. Like you fed that line to him while you were interviewing him. And look, this is, I don't know if even we need to edit this out, because it says it's something about the film, how filmmaking works, even documentary, at some, sometimes, it's, I needed that statement. I needed someone to say it, So there you go. It's not always, there's obviously a lot goes into. It's kind of like it's almost similar to the other thing that we mentioned before, like this scene with no sound or whatever. There is engineering behind this. It's not.
Of course.
I don't believe in any sense of like documentary is about depicting the truth with no mediation or something. This is bollocks. That doesn't exist.
Of course,
in any case, when you edit something, you put syntax and grammar to it at the end of the day. So whoever talks at the end of the day, it's the people who put the syntax and grammar that eventually get to talk. So that's just a little snippet on the things you mentioned.
I mean that's been our experience as well. Like there were definitely times we've been doing interviews on the ZAD where like sometimes we get to the end of a question and someone like in wrapping up their answer says something that's just like incredibly intriguing, and you just go like, please say more on that. Like they just drop something on you and you're like, oh, I want you to carry on for an hour about that. But like other times someone's kind of spoken for an hour already and you're like, could you just like say that again, but like just like in a couple of sentences, like just like because it's a little bit like, absolutely.
Yeah, of course. I mean, come on, we work on sound bites to some extent. Like we have to get because we're building a narrative, and sometimes anyway.
That's a question I guess I had, because you mentioned already, and you mentioned in the film and show in the film that like you worked on some of the propaganda to help with like recruitment in for the fight against Daesh. And I guess I want to leave this question somewhat open-ended, but like your thoughts on like producing propaganda versus in this documentary, you explicitly say, this is not propaganda. I want to be critical. I want to engage in something else here at a certain point when you are engaging more critically. And I just wonder about your thoughts about the differences and your experiences of the differences in those processes.
Look, I mean, yes, of course, in propaganda, I think there were three pieces of propaganda that I was involved in, quite heavily involved in, that became kind of viral. The first one was the I guess the propaganda video about the IFB itself after the victory in Minbij, which contains this somewhat recognizable image of some people dancing on a rooftop where there is an antenna that the hammer and sickle has been painted.
Yes, iconic.
Then the second one was the IRPGF announcement video, for which I would say, which also went viral at the time, and for which I will say, I would say it's not maybe my most representative work exactly, but it did exactly what it was commissioned to do. And as is even mentioned in the film, it kind of befitted the style of the written text. And let me tell you, we even edited that written text to like tone it down a bit. So again, no spoilers, although that video is out there. But so yeah, I like to kind of joke about that. That this video, I don't know if you've ever watched it or.
I've got something really funny to say. I have seen it, but remind me, I've got something else to say about it when you're done.
Okay, yeah. I like to joke about it that it kind of implies that the word anarchism triggers explosions. Yeah, like visually. If people want to have a look, if they find the video, they'll know what I mean. So anyway, so there you have. Like even in the film, I tried to make a joke about it. I'm a little bit disappointed that people seldom laugh. That this was supposed to be the only, like the one intentional laugh out loud moment in the film.
It's funny as fuck. It's fun. I remember in Manchester we laughed like.
Yeah, I cackled, and then I turned to my girlfriend and said, "If you could ever film me doing that exact same gag, could we please do that?"
Yeah.
So yeah, and then the third one, which was also quite a big debacle, let's say, was that picture, was a photograph, was that picture of this contingent of those anarchists, of this IRPGF formation that participated in the IFB, yeah? Which they called, and already there maybe some questions, which they called tequila, and it was supposed to be a kind of a queer contingent, which it what like some of them were indeed queer. I can testify to that. So that became a very viral picture. I fondly remember that learning at the time that Ricky Martin retweeted it.
And in case our listeners are not aware of the picture that Alexis is referring to, it's the one of the fighters in the IFB. Well, the
IRPGF, which was part of the IFB. These were IFB.
Part of the IFB. It's a battalion of the IFB where they're holding up a big sign and it says, "These F-slurs kill fascists." So it's that one. It's that kind of famous viral picture.
Yes, yeah. So there you can both, like, you can see in all those cases, although there's different degrees of whatever, like attention grabbing or whatever. You can see that yes, there is definitely, like, there is an embedded virability to the processing of the images themselves. You know, and they these were meant in different ways to be. These are all to some extent call outs. Yeah. So it's like this, yeah, it's propaganda in the sense that it's meant to convince, it's meant to draw attention and like produce kind of specific, if not entirely specific, more or less within a range of like outcomes. It's produced to to create an outcome. And that's another thing I really love to say in Q&As and presentations, that one of the people featuring in the film, one who gave also one of the best interviews, I would say, an American called Shaquille, an American of Indian descent, a British American of Indian descent. He actually came, and this is because of those three, maybe not obviously, but like my favorite one is the first one, is the video I made for IFB. And he actually came, he ended up coming to the IFB, and like whatever, which also means I ended up meeting him. We ended up becoming friends. He ended up coming to Athens, staying in my house for a while, and then he even came with me on some parts of the crowdfunding tour. And he came because of that video. Like
that's phenomenal. That's just how powerful it is.
He saw that video. At some point he mentions in his interview, I saw that video, and I thought, and that's the video he's talking about.
funny thing about that video. So yeah, this is the one that you reference in here is the one with the comrades dancing on the roof to Hopa Hemsin.
Yes.
Yeah. So actually, I owe you a credit because I found that online. I was making a video about fascists on TikTok, and there's this transphobic woman who was talking about how women could never do anything if they ever went to war, and I actually do like a record scratch bit and put in footage from your film. I didn't know it was from your film, literally, because I was just talking about the YPG and the women fighters of Kurdistan, so I actually have that in my video. So credit to you. Thanks. Now I know who filmed that video.
Well,
yeah, appreciate
Better
that, bro.
late than ever, you know. Like, this happens a lot.
Yeah,
let me get back to the answer, because I feel I've left maybe a bit some questions unanswered, even one previously, in fact.
Don't worry, we've all got ADHD. None of us remember anything.
Okay,
it's fine.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. So I guess then, and yeah, of course, then so I guess we can already see here in this description, like the difference of the process itself, you know, of the process, but also kind of the motivation. And although it is not, I would say it at the same time, rather, it is not entirely different, but it works on a very different level, and also a different scale. It's a different medium, making a YouTube video and making a film. It's a literally like a different scale, a different level of thing. Much, I would say, a higher level. You know, I definitely experienced it as a much higher level. But like I said, like at the same time, it does share some of the motivation. Like it's still even the film also wants to grab attention, wants to disseminate, like what's going on in Rojava, like how important it is. But at the same time, on that level, I also found that apart from anything else, apart from an issue of integrity, you know, to not just be, you know, a kind of partisan propaganda, BG, Serokap, you know, like this kind of just sort of cheerleading for something. Apart from the issue of integrity around that, there is also, I would say, an issue in terms of the potency of its propaganda potential, let's say, because again, it is still a film that at the end of the day supports Rojava. Like it has managed, it was a struggle sometimes, but it has managed to like include a bunch of criticisms, but it does, like, at the end of the day, it is like it supports Rojava, it supports the revolution, and it's like, you know, whatever it was, still no regrets in any case, you know, like for fighting for this. But especially on that level, I believe that a certain kind of propaganda, a lot of films, in fact, that have been made about Rojava, they are a little bit like their you know, their style and their narrative. It's a little bit like propaganda videos, but 2 hours, you know, or maybe 3 hours sometimes, in some cases. And I tend to think, I'm pretty sure, to be honest, that there's massive limitations to that kind of address. Like when you're building a narrative like that, you can at the very best preach the choir. But this is a film that aspired to address a much wider audience and to maybe, you know, draw closer, like maybe create sympathy for this revolution outside of its standard crowd, of its standard internet and generally like international audience that is already cheerleading for it. Now, don't get me wrong, there is definitely a use, sometimes in Greek we say some things are for internal consumption, and there's definitely a use. There's definitely a usefulness for this sort of text, in the broad sense, for this sort of propaganda at the end of the day, to to whatever, hype the morale, to keep people keen, but at the same time, as I said, it also doesn't reach much further than that. And I think that's something to take into account as well, besides the obvious, which is integrity and kind of some sort of commitment to honesty. I did try to make this film as honest as possible.
It comes across as, I would say, probably like an extremely honest film, because there's no point that I think he's dressing this up or he's making this out to be something that it's not. And based on what I know of Rojava, which is extremely limited, it's I live in fucking Britain, and how much actual news gets here about what's really going on. But in terms of the tone, really, you know what I mean, because it's quite obvious that there are like lots of different emotions happening. There's definitely an amount of fear. There's definitely an amount of excitement. There's definitely an amount of revolutionary joy and liberationary joy. And there is also humor, like you say, like there's humor in there, and just a lot of realness in it. Do you know what I mean? And I think like if you if you're producing propaganda like that is literally propaganda of the deed of like doing a revolution, like destroying a group of vile fascists, the only way you can do it is be real about it, right? And I think it was very much like I've seen it twice now, and I think it's very much an all-encompassing, very real, very honest account.
You watched it again then?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. I missed a little bit because I was late to the showing, so I think I came in maybe 30 minutes in the showing in Manchester. Yeah, so I wanted to get the full sort of the full bit. Let's talk a little bit more. Just sort of going back to the realness of it, because I think one of the biggest things for me about the film, especially on the second watch, I kind of knew it in the first watch. It was quite obvious that you were talking very much, very honestly about the logistics of war. Do you know what I mean? The logistics of particularly the war, in the way that you were, on the theatre that you were fighting in. For example, Syria is, quite a lot of it is desert, and, it's not easy to just like get water in the same way that you might in, other countries. But even the people who were native to the place were finding it difficult to get water. And obviously like an army marches on its stomach. And that was one of the problems that was like quite, obvious in the movie. Do you want to talk to us a bit more about that and about how that sort of like worked when you were out there?
I guess from the time that this film depicts, probably when that guy mentions that he's in the beginning of the film, someone is talking about the Battle of Mimbij, and he mentions that the very big problem was water, and that they had to drink. I mean, we also did this from time to time later on. Like I did this as well. That they had to drink water from water boilers, from like abandoned water boilers. Like would cut the pipe and get some water from that. It says the worst water he ever drank in his life. Which I can concur more or less. I might have had worse. But so that already gives you a picture. Like the worst is fairly to be expected, that it is when you are in the very front line of urban conflict, where as is also mentioned in the film, everything is covered in rubble. Like the terrain is particularly difficult to move around and navigate, and there is also like this, the nature of urban warfare is like that you never know where a problem might arise, where the enemy might be hiding mines, where there could be a mine or a trap, and so on and so forth. So I guess the worst of it would usually happen in the very, very front, yeah, where it's difficult because it's matters, logistical matters, difficult to reach. Yeah, you need to have like an armored vehicle brings in the food and the water. Now, at some point, thankfully, at some point, especially during the Raqqa campaign and in this Raqqa city as well, we had ready-made and rolled up kebabs coming to the front. You know, it's not because in other situations you actually have to cook. In most situations, you had to cook, and for which as well, you know, sometimes sometimes the logistics could be a bit poor. I kind of, not exactly fondly, but I remember that something amusing that I think I've had at some point. We were kind of quite low on many things in the logistics, and we were quite far from the front at that point, by the way. And we had, it turns out, we just had a lot of carbs, and there was this. I remember there was this. Not one. It was more than one meal, I think, but it was like, I don't know, one day or two, where this also involves the cooking skills of different fighters, you know, and whatnot. But we had this remarkable meal of what I would call like a kind of a carbohydrate festival of like plain pasta, boiled potatoes, and white rice. That was the meal. You know,
I want a fucking that's going on the menu at my house. Carbohydrate festival, hell yeah.
You know, so there was things like that, and especially like how difficult and how critical that was depends. Like there was occasions like that that would happen like as well in the rare and whatnot, but how critical and difficult it was, it depends a lot. It would depend a lot on the, you know, the state of the mission, let's say, the state, like where your specific situation and whatnot. And it was, I can't remember a point where we had like a march or something and we ran out of water. I can remember a couple of points. One, in when we actually were getting there, like the march to actually cross the border, because you cross the border through the, like you kind of, you know, get a boat through the river, cross the river, and then march. And we had like a very long march, and that was quite something. That might have been the most one of the times like I've been the most thirsty ever. And there was like a pickup truck, like a bunch of vehicles actually, but a bit in the forefront, a pickup truck waiting for us with like a large pot of water, which was like, it was like in those old films or whatever, or cartoons or something, where someone's in the desert and suddenly sees an oasis or something, and you know,
you can hear the choir singing.
The most thirsty ever, kind of desperately thirsty in my life. And once again, like during the war, which however was also, I mean, okay, no, technically it was the very, very front, but like it hadn't been very active around those days or anything, you know, it wasn't urban, like we were not in like an urban kind of more intense urban environment or whatever. And it was, to be honest, kind of administrative error. Like, not gonna name names, so I might as well say like, but like, yeah, like command fucked up. That was pretty much it. Like command fucked up, and that was also quite dreadful. I remember, like, I might have considered. I didn't, but I might have even considered like drinking my piss. It was that kind of thing. Like,
if you gotta do it, you gotta do it.
Like, so,
sometimes that's what you gotta do.
It's good enough for beer grills, you know.
The person in the chat that just asked this question is gonna hate me because it was something that we were planning on asking you again because you'd mentioned it previously. But yeah, I was wondering if you wanted to talk a little bit about, because you said about like the response to the film and how varied it's been. Do you want to talk like a little bit about that? Because obviously, you know, if you're going around and you're doing a showing, you might get all kinds of people depending on how it's advertised, promoted, where you're doing it, whatever. Like obviously in Manchester, it was quite obviously a bunch of crusty communists that I knew all of them. Do you know what I mean? And they all knew people actually who went to Rojava, right? And so that was like it was obvious that everybody was going to be like, that's great, this was really good. But what has it been like in other places?
Let me just quickly say, just because it's a bit amusing, that Manchester was a very particular case, because like, without like going too much specific, like the main organizer did literally describe the event afterwards that it was like having his birthday, because he didn't advertise it very widely. He knew about like exactly how big the venue is, and he just invited all of his friends, you know. So that's so that was a bit of a special situation. Other than that, like, it's kind of like you said, it depends on the not the venue, but like the crowd, the situation around it, like the hosting, the organizers, you know, and so on, and what kind of people will show up. There's no guarantee, but like when you talk about reception, like, you know, it also made a kind of round of festivals. And like technically it's still going. There might get selected in one more. I have a bit of but we'll see. Maybe not. Overall, I'd like to say like it was like the festival reception was a very, very, let's say, mixed bag. Like it's won several awards on the one hand. On the other hand, these are from rather not very big festivals, which is total, like, which sometimes those festivals, for some people might say these in some ways they're you know, they are more interesting or whatever, because exactly you get to see more independent things or whatever. But it also got like a lot of rejection. And by the way, I say this as a bit as a new, because I was new in this festival game. I never did such a thing before. But it was like kind of clear to everyone that we have to do this. It was kind of a bit of a budget for it and so on. So we did, and I have to say like that I've come to understand that this is kind of very normal, you know, that that festival game is very rough, and this is a film with I believe in the as I learned from the festival game, that it's technically described as a zero budget film, as a no budget film, not a low budget film, but a no budget film. So I guess it's kind of normal that such a sort of no budget film, you know, can't go maybe very far in like sort of A-list festivals or whatever. Although you do get the odd, you know, every so often you might get the odd sort of outsider here and there. But overall, you know, it doesn't happen very regularly. However, I would still say, because this is like, I can say, okay, so that's fair enough, it's normal, whatever. But I can still say I was still a little bit disappointed, because also I guess in the festival game you expect maybe a bit more a bit of reception like in the festivals that are in your own country. So I was a little bit disappointed by Greek festivals, how this didn't in particular, and in some cases about some festivals that were supposed to be like very specifically, you know, sort of targeting independent, but also like that were meant to be sort of left-wing political, and still it kind of didn't work. So in that sense, like I said, the festival reception was a very mixed bag. Yeah, whatever that means. I'm not even sure what that means. I'm certainly not gonna assume, like I already said, it's because many people, often tell me that, the film is too radical or something like that. If I'm being very honest, I don't think it's just that. I think the film also has some weaknesses, which is on this level of, when you're dealing with, very experienced professionals of filmmaking and so on. They I guess maybe they really take some things into very serious account. Like we said, this is a zero budget film and like a very, very low budget film. And there is some amateurish characteristics about it, I suppose. Anyways, so other than that, like in terms of the more like let's say the independent screenings, like the one you attended, overall the reception has been very positive. I would say very positive.
What's one of the worst things that someone said about it? That's like, maybe not ideologically, because obviously there's going to be people saying shit like, oh, a bunch of communists, you don't know what you're doing, you ruin the country or whatever, who cares, shut up, they're wrong, they're just wrong. But like, so what would probably hurt me, I'm thinking about if I made like a film or a video or something, like what would hurt me is if someone really just like, gave me like a hard time about like the production or something. Have you had anything like that?
No, not really. Not in the like. I can imagine like what I was saying before, like on the sort of on the festival level, being I can imagine being not selected for reasons having to do with the production value, so to speak, or like with the production. But not like in the independent where there is like the feedback, because there's Q&A. Not really. Not. I can't remember something like that. Like I would have to think what is the worst thing that anybody said about it. It's also it depends how I would like define worse, let's say, but I can think like there is, I guess, not so often, in fact, but since I guess a couple of you are Brits, like there was one in London. This hasn't happened as much as I was expecting, but in London, a kind of pro-Assad tanky showed up, and he did the thing, like he did the standard thing. Like about about trying to go on, whatever, like and who pays for all that? And he tried to do a typical kind of, pro-Assad, pro-regime. I don't know if I need to explain
Cringe.
This regime.
No, I know. Yeah.
We're talking about the regime, which is the regime of Bashar al-Assad, who is the son of Hafez al-Assad, and as we say in Greek. Even like, not that Hafez al-Assad was not like, I don't know, some great socialist leader or whatever, but still, Bashar al-Assad, as we say in Greek, is like a hair from his eyebrows. So, originally, we don't say eyebrows, but
it's okay. You can say pubes. We're an 18+ show. Don't worry about it.
Anyway. So this dude, let me just say at this point, which I like to put in the conversation, even if no one like directly asks, and I definitely said in that occasion in London, the regime of Bashar al-Assad is by very, very far the force that has massacred the most civilians. Like by very, very far, than much more than all the other forces combined, including ISIS, by the way, nowhere near. Like the amount of slaughter and destruction, the amount of people. It's estimated, I never fully trust these numbers, but it is roughly estimated to be like around 1 million people. So and there is a section of the global left, which has always had and is currently undergoing a kind of massive inflammation of a certain ideological pathology, And among other things, they support the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. I hope this will not, rile up any of your audience, but you were asking for more questions. So maybe, I don't know who's watching right now, but maybe that can.
I do not think we're going to get any Assad defenders in our chat. Don't worry.
We will ban them fucking cunts rapid. Don't worry about it. No, that's a great fucking answer, and that's so fucking funny. Like, it's just you could just kind of tell like who is being super Hegelian and ideology brained about it rather than based in materialism and actual facts and power dynamic analysis. You can tell who gets most of their fucking politics from the internet and not actually going and fighting in a fucking revolution. As far as I'm fucking concerned, that motherfucker can shut the fuck up until he gets an AK and goes and does a revolution.
Yeah, I mean, I think we have some Assad defenders kicking around in the UK, but they're all attached to that very like up its own ass, doing nothing, like vanguard party that actually has no links to any like direct action going on whatsoever. A bunch of like George Galloway fans. Like, yeah, I don't think amongst the like organized left we have,
In fact, do you know what I will say? Do you know what I will say? That's a very fucking London thing to have experienced, actually. And I'm not saying that wouldn't happen in Manchester because there's some fucking weirdos in Manchester, but very fucking London. Very, very London.
It was kind of
I'll
weird
agree with that.
It wasn't someone anybody knew, it seemed.
Yeah, that's always the way. Yeah.
I will say this, because it's like I said, like integrity and being fair. As far as like Assadist tankies or like this sort of tankies come, he was quite decent. Like he said his piece, he heard the answer. Even the way he presented his case was more decent than average. I mean, it was definitely on that track, definitely. It was completely recognizable to me. But yeah, as far as these folks go, he was quite he had a kind of decency.
Yeah.
Not always, most of the time.
I just find Assad defenders so funny because, like, I mean, not when you're talking to them, they're aggravating, but like as a concept, because it's just like, oh, you care about communism and you want to like you want to support like communists, like leftists in Syria. Damn, if only there were some leftists in Syria you could support. Oh, I guess you need to like make up one and pretend that Assad is a leftist instead. Like, it's absolutely ridiculous.
Well, I think one of the funniest
part of this ideological pathology that I was mentioning before is this campism, that kind of just needs to always survive in any kind of context.
I think one of the funnier things is that our audience is not used to someone using tanky in the traditional term, because you're quite clearly talking about like a very authoritarian kind of Stalinist, style of understanding communism. Every single one of the hosts of Red Planet has been called a tanky by extremely insane neoliberal morons on the internet. So it's actually bizarre. Because I just wanted to clarify for anyone listening, Alexis is definitely not a fucking debate bro. So don't worry, he's using tanky in the traditional sense, referring to the invasion of Czechoslovakia.
I've always understood tanky as a more internal term as well. Has it been hijacked by right-wing people now?
Yeah, neoliberals more like
they watch our stuff clearly,
Exactly. Absolutely great.
I just remembered something that I kind of wanted to say, and you see all this discussion about tankies and whatnot, which was something I left unanswered much previously to a question that Sophie asked, and it was about this sort of coming together and whatnot. And I think this is rather telling, and I'm going to have to speak about another war as well in mentioning this, because I also wanted to say that, like, as I said, there was definitely a sense of, we need to be fully together in this when we're out there, and especially when we are close to facing the enemy or when we are actually facing the enemy, which happened a bunch of times, which is not always the case, by the way. This is another thing about war. Like there's people who made this journey, traveled there, and never had like contact. Yeah, never had contact with the enemy, never like had combat. But at the same time, as I did already kind of imply, there was a lot of like, it's not like there wasn't a lot of, you know, this and that and kind of, you know, tensions and antagonisms between the parties that amongst themselves and between the internationalists and the parties. That because there was a lot of like, so there was a lot of such dynamic, but it, and what I want to say about it is that it's like, it's almost like how to say, like a graph, like the further away you are from danger, the more fertile the ground becomes for infighting, let's say.
True.
I would like to mention something, especially, I don't know how much of an anarchist audience you have.
A sizable amount.
Okay, I'll take your word for that. So in Ukraine, when I went to Ukraine, I went there to cover specifically the activities of anarchists, because there was a political organization and a military unit and a military organization being kind of not set up, it was already set up, but kind of developing, let's say. And when I arrived, and I will say these things because they are pretty much, well, much more publicly known than I ever wanted them to be, and contrary to the advice of many of us, it is kind of well known, at least to the people that follow this sort of thing, that these both of those organizations kind of split. The military one, not in the same way exactly, like it faced some difficulties in developing as well and whatnot, and it kind of didn't really continue as such as it was, like the anti-authoritarian unit. As for the political one, though, and again, since they've issued public statements against each other, and there's not much to hide here, there's not much to be discreet about, it was quite interesting to experience how, like, it was very, very vivid a point to take that, like, I arrived in Kiev when it was a total ghost town. It was fully, like, it was under siege. Yeah, there was a very, very strict curfew and everything, and it was really like an eerie place to see, you know, like. And at that time, and I also learned that there was like this, that it was both of those like organizations, all this activity of the anarchists that gained a lot of attention and a lot of momentum at the time, was the result and the outcome of an unprecedented coming together, of an unprecedented unification of the Ukrainian anarchist scene, is probably the best word here, and which is also not very sizable to begin with, was not very sizable to begin with. So they all came together, and it was like quite something to see how, as the siege of Kiev, because this was kind of mostly happening in Kiev with some kind of back, how to say, some support, like a lot of support coming, or some of the organizations coming from Lviv, but it was, let's say, along the same axis of the front, yeah, in relation to the front, like, and as soon as the siege was like stopped, as soon as this, you know, the convoy left and whatever, and the whole war was basically transferred far away from Kiev and onto the east side, mostly, it's almost like something clicked, you know, and everything, like the you know, all like the friction started escalating, and it did so, and for that time as well, it was not like Kiev during that time. I literally saw that, like, from being a total ghost town, like after a while, you could see like people were just having coffee in the cafeteria, whatever, like and whatever, taking the bus and going to work, and you could see this transition, like friction just started escalating until it got to the point of completely unraveling.
That's fascinating.
So that's also something like that's something to keep, like that's something I can testify about. Like there's definitely a very strong correlation.
We have a Patreon. It's www.https://
That's not the
patreon.com.
order that goes in, but okay.
Whatever, it's patreon.com/red_planet. We have a lot of different tiers that you can get a lot of cool stuff with, like some merch, some pin badges, some stickers. You can come into our Discord and argue with each other about weird stuff and we don't really understand. And then we have to ask you to explain it, and then everyone understands each other again because we're all normal. And that's really fun, and we have a really fun idea coming up soon, and I think we're going to try and get it sorted soon, where we're going to make Tim listen to us talk about Deep Space Nine. I've also been thinking about, and I don't know if I'm actually going to do this, so we might just cut this out, but I've been thinking about trying to like get my gran to watch Belki Sibe with me and just like film her reactions and my reactions, because she's really funny. Because this weekend this is why I was actually late to the show today. I don't know if we started a bit late. The audience might have not known that, but now they do. The curtain's been pulled back. But like, I was there with her last night. I've been looking after my nan and my mum's dogs. And we're watching the news about the fascists and stuff like that. And she turns to me, and I shit you not, she says, "I know what fascists are, but what are anti-fascists?" So I just said, "Nana, you know your dad who like went to Germany to fight Hitler and all that? Kind of like that, but when you do, forget it. Doesn't matter. Just gave up in the end. She's 86, so
I think I'd love to see her watch Belki Sibe, to be honest.
Alexis, what do you think about maybe some bonus content for our patrons where I make my 86-year-old grandmother watch your film?
Yeah, well, it sounds like there's something catchy about that.
I think so. It'd be like, what's that British show, Gogglebox?
It would be like Gogglebox, yeah.
Revolution edition.
So, let's jump into our audience questions segment. The first question for you, Alexis, from our audience is from Tara. And they say, where can we see Belki Sibe in the USA?
Well, it was just screened in some kind of anarchist conference, the location of which I cannot reproduce right now. But it was actually somewhere off the coast anyway, like in the real America, but there will be more screenings. Like for sure, this is also under in progress. I'm trying to arrange a few screenings. I even considered making an actual like physical sort of live tour, but this hasn't progressed for a number of reasons. Also because there's an ocean in between, and a large amount of money needed to cross it. But also because I've been a little bit overwhelmed with trying to organize even like tours and so on, just in Europe, just within Europe and within Greece as well. And there's also now even in August I'm having like which is in Greece, it's like August is supposed to be the month where like the time where like everything stops, and still like Like I have some screenings over here, and a whole bunch. Like I'm trying to arrange a Scandinavian tour. I'm trying to arrange a bunch of tours within Greece. Now I'm trying to arrange a second tour in the UK. It seems, or something. I don't know how it will look this time around. And this is all in progress. So I don't see that happening very soon. But there will. I'm quite confident that there will be screenings, which I would probably be able to make a Q&A after the screening via Skype, like kind of like what we're doing now, via Skype or Zoom or whatever of those. So please, Tara and whoever else is interested in the US, please find me on any social media, and you should be able, like, hopefully there will be one close to you. Now, in terms of publishing the film, it's not published yet. It will be eventually. I can tell you that. I don't yet have a clear date on that because of all this overwhelming amount of kind of scheduling with live tours and whatnot, and a bunch of other factors and parameters. But it is. If something is absolutely certain, is that eventually it will be published. There are questions about that because I'm a bit concerned if some platform might drop it for whatever reason, because there's some harsh bits in it as well, as you might have noticed. But hopefully it will be okay, and it will be primarily uploaded on my YouTube channel, which you can all check, although it hasn't had any new content for a while now. But let me just say that for anyone who looks me up, this film kind of dominated my life for way too long, and I'm still building up. If anything, I'm putting the foundations of my sort of social media presence and my channels and whatnot in this new media environment that I'm basically fairly new to this new media environment, and I'm just now kind of building up. So don't get too disappointed that the last video in my YouTube is from November. It is mostly because I post a lot of stuff on the other, which are more related to Greece. I kind of had this idea of keeping YouTube for more international things of more international interest or whatever. I'm not sure if that makes sense anymore, to be honest, because people keep telling me just push content. Just load things.
Just keep uploading, bro.
This is how the game works.
Yeah.
That's not how I work, really, but
who fucking does, dude? I feel the exact same, and I don't even do even close to the amount of work that you do. So that answers the next question as well, actually, about where can we see the film outside of a viewing. So thank you for that, Alexis. Thank you for the question, Wintry Mute. But I think also we should say, Alexis, that people can book you for a viewing, innit, right? If they pay for your plane ticket and they pay for the place and maybe some accommodation for you, then they can book you to come and do a viewing if you're free, right?
Yes, definitely. People have contacted me already. A bunch of anarchist book fairs have had some contact with me, and I've been invited also to Denmark, to Romania, and so on. People can get in touch with me, and whoever is interested in organizing a screening in different venues, let me say as well. It doesn't have to be something strictly political. On the contrary, we are trying to disseminate this film as far and wide as possible. So cultural centers, whatever, your local pub, if for some reason this is a thing, or whichever kind of artistic or whatever cultural center, as well as, of course, independent cinemas is also, has been, there've been some screenings, and there will be more just in Greece for now. But this is also a possibility, and of course any political space, naturally. This mostly people who have contacted me are mostly somehow involved in some sort of radical politics. But there's been a few hits from like people from like cinema clubs, cultural centers, and so on as well, who don't seem to be directly involved in anything very radical. So yes, please, anyone feel free. My email does feature somewhere, maybe not as prominently as it should, somewhere in my social media, but you can contact me in pretty much any platform. I have even TikTok, which is weird for me to not just to say, but to realize that I actually have TikTok. But here you go. My friend who was kind of I guess that feels silly to say, kind of something like a social media manager for a while, more like a trainer, really, because I didn't know this shit. Like I started using social media for the very first time in Rojava during the war. This is like as I used to say in my presentations back in the crowdfunding campaign, when I was a teenager, we had a family email.
Let's move on to the next question. Soph, you look like you were wanting to ask this one.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wintry Mute has asked, what would you say towards people who want to stand up to fascists but are scared of putting themselves in a situation where physical violence may ensue?
Well, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff you can say to that, but I would start, given the context of our discussion, I would start with, well, something that features in the film. Now, a conflict with anti-fascists in an urban environment, between fascists and anti-fascists in an urban environment, usually it does not involve the level of violence that a war does, but we often like to refer to it metaphorically, even as a war, like a social war or whatever, but or part of a broader social war or whatever. So if we take a little bit this metaphor, I would say that there is a part of the film, spoiler alert, where someone explains that war is not just some lads going in front and shoot and pulling a few shots. That war is a whole apparatus, like that. In fact, he says war is a complete praxis, and he explains how important all the different layers of the mechanism that is our force, how they are important and how they are interconnected. So I would say that in any conflict there is always kind of non-combat positions to fill. That's the first thing. I would say that's the first thing to point out.
Yeah, that part of the film showed like some food production, for example, as like part of the overall apparatus, and it's something that I think we're quite big on this show, is like that the revolution is not just people with guns. It's a whole, as you say, a complete praxis, and like it's all one thing.
There's so much of that in the film as well, right? So much of that, which is great to see. And yeah, so much of the not just the the people using the earth movers and the food.
Yeah, bulldozers were also massively important.
Yeah, all that stuff was amazing to see. And then also like the assemblies and all this kind of stuff. Like this is all part of the revolutionary project, which is pretty incredible. Yeah.
However, not to I'd like to continue a little bit, not to seem as if kind of avoiding the real question or whatever, or if some people might think along those lines, because I might think, okay, whatever, we already know that or whatever, although people don't always do. But that the real question is, how do you get over the fear and whatever, and how do you get over being like scared or whatever, and just and well, to some extent, this is kind of an internal question because it has to do with quite deep existential issues that you have to face anyway within the human condition. Yes, it's like overcoming fear is, you don't have to be an anti-fascist to have to face that. It's something like kind of embedded in the human condition as well. So there is you know, obviously I'm not necessarily an expert on that. I'm not, you know, there's a lot of psychoanalytical whatever background, like whatever narratives that go into that, and like people can look them up and trying to like sort of whatever, try something like whatever introspection or whatever, like the kind of things we commonly say. But to say something more relevant, I would also say this, even in the sense, now focusing on the sense of the violence itself, the conflict, the physical conflict, the front line or whatever, and to something that kind of relates with my experience and the film. I would say what is very important to understand is that even also, in fact, to some extent, the higher the level of the conflict and the higher the organization, the mechanisms of the forces that collide, the more you understand that this is not like, this is collective violence. It's collective violence. In many situations of combat, you can't, I could even say most, but let's leave it like that. In many situations of combat, you can't even know for sure who killed whom, you know, like there's a situation, and I'm talking about this situation now, but you can, you know, you can make analogies like there's like, because there's like thousands of because the whole team together, like a machine or a body or whatever you want to call it, like whatever metaphor you want to use, it kind of acts in a coordinated manner and attacks another force. It's not like if you're in a situation as well, if we want to expand a little bit on that, war, like the highest form of conflict, you might say, and this kind of, you know, combat, doesn't necessarily, like, can be very, very different, like in its nature, the nature of its equipment and how it unfolds is very, very different than like a street fight. Yeah, you don't throw punches, so it's not necessarily. I remember I met many years after a Bulgarian comrade recently, and he still remembered, because he's a big dude, he still remembered that I told him that, you know, well, actually in war, it's more important to be fast than to be big. In fact, being big can be a problem because you give more target.
True with any kind of fighting in general as well, because I used to do Muay Thai, you know, Thai boxing. And my crew used to say all the time, like, don't put any more muscle on. You're absolutely fine the size that you are. Like, if you get ever in a situation in the street where a guy is big, it's gonna take him way more long time to fucking hook like that than you can get 3 hooks in before he's fucking finished. So yeah, I think that's just like general, like, yeah, sort of like destroying that toxically masculine idea that you have to be a fucking big muscle hunk to do anything right. You know what I mean?
This before we move on to other questions, I think I just wanted to say, this reminds me, it's one more spoiler for the film, if that's okay, but it's just when there was a shot of I think it was the YPG, but of the shot of like all the female soldiers together, it was just very powerful to me. And like this kind of conversation, I think, brought that up for me, because it's just like something about like being unafraid of confronting that, and also like, I guess, working together as that machine, like you said. I don't know, it was just very beautiful, and I got a little tearful when that first shot came up with them. It was just really, really wonderful,
powerful. Yeah.
Cool. I want to press that point very briefly, just on that, to say that I already said that, like, this is the nature of war and combat with firearms, you know, and so on. But I would say it still does translate. It can translate on the level of the street on exactly that point, that it is collective violence and that it is a body of people operating like a mechanism. But this takes organization. So in terms, you know, so to kind of try and wrap it up and reach a more direct answer to the question, I think it relies a lot to the organizational level of the group you are in. This is what makes you unafraid. The sense that we have a very strong, we are fortified, we have a strong organization, we have practiced this. I know where my position is, I know what everybody else is going to do. We trust each other, and given the right whatever planning and the right timing, we can crush them, and I can be part of this. Because we will all be doing it together. It will not be. It's not going to be me in a ring, with a big. It's something.
Great answer, thank you.
Different process. That's just that.
Absolutely.
So go on, Tim. Do you want to do the next one?
So this next one we've got from B-Rat. They're asking, is there a strong anti-fascist movement still present at Greek or other Southern European universities today, or is that unique to Athens at the time?
I'm not the best expert to speak about Southern Europe in general. I'm pretty sure, just without looking, so to speak, that there is for sure there would be still anti-fascist groupings and so on in Italy and in Spain. I would be very surprised to learn otherwise. And having said that, I mean, in the universities as well, I would expect it's as a place of young people and whatnot, that there is some organizing there, some recruiting or whatever. As for Greece, no, that it was there. There are obviously ups and downs in how the movement, in the situation of the movement. And these ups and downs also have to do with the historical context and with anti-fascism as well. Obviously, it's like we said, there is always a kind of, action and reaction dynamic, and so on. So obviously, we had at some point an openly neo-Nazi party being the third biggest party in the parliament, and they were also roaming the street. And this is not, keep in mind, this is not like anything else you've seen, except maybe that Jobbik thing in Hungary, but I'm not even sure. This is proper Sieg Heil neo-Nazi. This is not Marie Le Pen. This is proper Sieg Heil neo-Nazis, with swastika tattoos and shit. And Sieg Heil tattoo, their leader, while they were in parliament, literally said in a public speech, we are not the yield, but the crop, let's say, not exactly, but anyway, it's not a translation contest. We are the crop of the defeated of 1945. He literally said that. So this is what we were dealing with. So naturally, at that point, anti-fascism had a much bigger hype. It was, it was more relevant than ever. And so it was also, more prevalent and whatnot. Since then, they suffered they suffered a lot of setbacks. Let's say they split. Many things have happened. They're nowhere near as much of a threat, in terms of infesting the streets and whatnot. They're still present, and so is it never finished. It never went away. It was pretty much always there, and it still is, in the universities as well. Most certainly, again, and overall, the movement is not right now, and I'm kind of talking primarily about the anarchist movement because it's also kind of the most significant in some ways, especially in terms of militancy over here in Greece. This is something particular about Greece to some extent. But also overall, the movement is not right now in its peak of vibrancy, but it's always there.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
The next question is from Husker Du, not the band. I'm wondering whether most soldiers have downtime for sports, and what do they usually play in that region?
Okay, that's an interesting question. Soldiers do have downtime, quite a lot overall. And I would say this kind of tends to happen in most wars. although everything does depend on the particularities of every situation, and every war is different. But I guess in this case, as in many others, most of the time, and this is something that kind of features in the film as well, one of the aspirations of the film was also to like kind of talk about war in a more kind of sober and honest way, you know, try to avoid all the over lyrical, you know, sentimentalism or something, and kind of, you know, show some things for what they are, let's say. And part of that is that in many wars, if not most of the time is like there's nothing happening. Most of the time is just hardship and boredom. Most of the time you just, you know, you're like, it's not easy, but it's not like, you know, you're always like in a trench and like the enemy is always like, you know, whatever, potentially 100 meters away and whatever. Like, you know, even in fact, after you've been there for a while, you don't even get up for one shot. Like, wow, this is very typical. You literally don't get up, like you don't put your book down for one shot. One shot is like, because it can happen, you know, whatever, someone's probably something. Then second shot, you hear a second shot, maybe you put the book down and you kind of, you know, you get up a bit, potentially still sitting, and then is somebody can someone get on the radio and see what's the, and then if you hear like a bunch of shots, like continue, okay, then you like run, whatever, like get up and grab your gun and look for the commander, or if you are the commander, like look for everyone, like tell everyone to get up and whatever and get to their positions. So yeah, it's not a situation of like, you know, all continuous like tension or whatever. If anything, there's like rather very brief and almost rare outbursts of like extreme shit. But not like, but that's like a small fraction of the time. So having cleared that out, interestingly, in fact, it makes a lot of sense. Although some people did like and try to play football at times, I think it was technically not allowed. And the one that the sport that was mostly sort of promoted and most commonly played was volleyball. Now, if I have, and I will speak speculatively here, I'm going to make that clear because I'm in no position to know, but I prefer to think that this is a more kind of militarily, like a decision based on military reason and kind of, you know, practical, like kind of logical practicalities, considering of practicalities and whatnot, that like football is actually a very dangerous sport. In fact, statistically, like there's a massive amount of injury going on in football, especially if you're playing in a fucking, you know, yard of cement made of, you know, or something like that, or if you don't actually have like grass or something. But even in the grass, I once broke my what do you call this? The collarbone, yes, in the London Squatters football tournament. Just to mention that, since we're talking about all that. And somebody said, I actually, I'm not gonna name names, but somebody made a very memorable joke that's saying that this is the first time the London Antifa managed to hurt someone and didn't get caught. Anyway, so as I was saying, I want to think that this was the logic behind it. That, you know, that you want to rather have, you know, soldiers playing a sport, which I'm totally, like, I can totally get behind, and like, yeah, even I would consider like kind of not allowing football, to be honest. Basketball is not a thing there at all, and however, I can't avoid the suspicion that there might have also been like some kind of logic that volleyball is more of a female sport, which is, you know, could be well intended for as many things, but you know, I don't know, in my perception is questionable as a, you know, approach, especially for women who play football, you know, like and other sports. But even for women who play volleyball, probably. But anyway, just to put that out. But again, this is speculation. I don't have any evidence that this was. It's just a suspicion I wanted to mention. But more importantly, I think in any case, it was the best choice, and they should keep doing that. As far as I'm concerned, it's makes sense.
That's a great answer. Thank you. The last audience question we have is from Abigail, who has asked, in the film, at quite a few points, we see YPG/YPJ graffiti. Was this all by IFB for propaganda purposes, or were other battalions doing graffiti too?
Oh, most certainly. No, most certainly. There was this was a fairly common practice. Internationalists overall, which internationalists were not only in the IFB, they were embedded in all sorts of other battalions. By the way, the use of the word battalion is not very literal in a technical sense in how we use these terms in English. Just a small parenthesis. But no, it's not. It wouldn't necessarily be from the IFB. No, it could have been anyone.
Great. Well, that is it for the question and answer section from the audience. Normally, what we do on the show, and this is probably something Conrad asked you to think about, is give our audience homework to do, because part of this show, if I didn't explain it to you properly when I met you, is to try and get, you know, online, extremely online, ideological, purity-based people who who need to go outside and touch grass to go and do that in the best way possible. What would you say is homework that you would want to give like an online audience, mostly online leftist audience, to try and get them to do some kind of activism? What would you say would be the thing you'd recommend?
I struggled a little bit with this question because I saw that you had this question in that form you have. And it does also mention, because originally, you see, I thought it should be something relevant to the film or to my experience of that or whatever. And I had one idea, but then I also saw that it's meant to be somehow related to direct action. And then I had another idea, and I then realized there's a couple of issues with that idea. One is that it might be a little bit, or not. I'm not sure about that first one. It might be a bit too much for people to like. It's not exactly a hope. Like it's quite an undertaking potentially, but it kind of relates with my work again, and that's how I felt I should answer somehow. Like that. It's not like I'm an expert. Like. And the second thing, which I need you now to tell me whether to go on or not, is that it would entail encouraging people to technically, legally speaking, commit crimes.
Well, we have a common phrase here at Red Planet, which is that no one should ever break the law. It's really bad because the law is the arbiter of all morality, and we would never break the law because breaking the law is bad and wrong. But the material
for entertainment's
conditions...
sake, you could tell us what the thing would be, and then we can all agree that it would be bad to break the law.
Okay, I'm gonna let's work on that. First of all, talking about entertainment and all that. So, and you know, I'm here as this guy that is new on social, on like new media game and so on. So my YouTube channel that I mentioned, well, the last video on it, which is, by the way, let's clear that out as well. Like not mine. I actually, which I don't do often, but I made an exception. For this one, I fished it out of Athens in the media, but it's a practice I'm well familiar with. So the last video is a particular practice that is quite popular, has been quite popular with Greek anarchists, and it's the supermarket raid. Now, obviously, this is just an example of activism, and you can take the, you know, the whatever, like the blueprint of that and apply it to anything else without breaking the law. Obviously, these people are degenerates who, you know, don't care about the law.
So shocking.
This is what happens in Greece sometimes. So what you have in this case, which is, and it was very interesting to me, you see, because it was kind of a revival of an old practice that was very had like kind of blossomed, like it was happening like all over Greece, like even in small towns, you know, and so on, like hundreds of those, literally hundreds of those all over Greece. Okay, not like many hundreds, but over 100, I'm pretty sure. Which is basically a kind of thing that this is the thing that it requires a certain level of organization. You know, it requires experience. It requires getting a little bit how to say overcoming certain things, even about how to organize, even about that. You know, people would have to take certain roles, you know, for this to function normally, you know, and so on. And what you have is a highly organized group that has, I can only assume, you know, made or from what I remember from back in the day as well, yeah, because this was very big in the times of the crisis, like between let's say 2008 and 2012, and these folks kind of revived it. So yeah, a highly organized group of, they look like they're like 20 or something, but I remember back then there was even some massive ones with like 100 people or more that would like close the road or whatever. But what you see in the video, and it's you can see like people here. So you know, I encourage people to visit my channel, and you can see the video is exactly the level of organization. Like you can watch the video and how they're moving from a back street altogether, like someone is giving, there's clearly people kind of coordinating, there's clearly people with different roles. A bunch of them, like a handful of them, 2 or 3 of them, are kind of going to the side to pull some garbage bins to close the road. So, which means probably to create a traffic so the police can get there, so they can delay the police. And then you see also that there's different groups kind of doing different, going in different directions. There's one person kind of being the speaker and like telling people to like whatever, be calm and whatnot. So this is a highly organized activist action, but it is also something that is quite related, you know, to community address, which is why I like to mention it as well, yeah, because it's a very extrovert action. It's a very extrovert kind of activism. And although in that particular case, these folks, bless them, they actually managed, they took, this is not how it was working traditionally, and I'm not being like a boomer, this is not how we did it in my day, but it is like objectively not how it usually works. Because they declared, they issued like some kind of communique or something that they would take this produce, they would somehow send this produce to the victims of the floodings in Thessalia, which you might remember because it was so destructive that it made international news. Now, as much as this is, you know, very noble as well, how it usually works is that you target a supermarket near a street market, like a farmer's market or something like that, which is also very common in Greece. So not necessarily the same for every locality, but again, there are places where people congregate for one reason or another, yeah. And especially like kind of lower class people, you know, and so on. Like you can target specific areas. Obviously, you're not going to do this in Manhattan, you know. I suppose. And then, like, so people back then would like expropriate a whole bunch of produce from the supermarket. Is basically a robbery, technically, and then like just distribute it to the people in the local market, you know, or in the local square or whatever. So yeah, have a look at that and try to imagine yourself being part of something like this, even if it's not, you know, or better, you know, if it's not breaking the law, because we don't do this on the show, right?
That's right, Alexis. Anyone doing that would be so bad and not a real Red Planet fan, I would say. But obviously more and more people are just going to start robbing supermarkets as the material conditions of capitalism force the workers to do such things. So with that in mind, thank you so much, Alexis. You've been such a fantastic guest. Yeah, do you want to plug anything else? Like, do you actually know? I think we've got your socials here. It's linktree.ee/Alexis Daloumis. We got most of the stuff on there. Is there anything else that you want to plug?
Yeah, I send that to your guy. But I guess like people can find me just by typing Alexis Daloumis, which I guess is written somewhere over there in the description. Even if the Linktree is quite useful, I guess. It's something very new to me. That friend who became my social media manager for a little while, that she taught me this, among other things. I didn't know what Linktree was. But I think my Facebook is not in there. But in any case, people can find me across any social media platform just by typing in Alexis Daloumis in the search. And look for the picture where it's me with a like helmet and vest, bulletproof vest that says press. So it's kind of a quite characteristic image as well. And also, if people really want to support what I'm doing, as I said, I'm kind of currently building up all this stuff. I also have a Patreon, which I haven't really developed very well because I don't know the first thing about it. And by the way, Sophie, if we ever meet in person, I hope you'll get a little bit of time to give me a quick crash course on how to do Patreon.
Yeah, absolutely, sure thing. Yep.
Okay, brilliant. And also lately I've been advised, and particularly after coming to London, in fact, to the UK, and I also use a PayPal account, which is just my email. Like if anyone wants to make a one-off contribution, I saw there's something with biscuits. I'm gonna ask you about that if we meet. I didn't know about that. But yeah, like for now, these are like also the two main ways that people can like sort of contribute, because this kind of work, as I have pinned in the usually in the comments of my videos on YouTube, there are no sponsors. It's completely independent work. There's no sponsors, no buyers. No funding other than the public.
Fantastic. Yeah, so you heard him, folks. Go give Alexis money.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for coming on our show. Thank you so much for making such an incredible film. It's absolutely wonderful. I can't wait to watch. I can't wait to watch it again with my grandma. And thank you so much for joining us. It's been fantastic.
Thanks, Alexis.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you for having me. It's been great to meet y'all.
Bye.
Take care.
Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Well, it doesn't. I don't think it gets much better than that. I think that we should probably just very briefly mention that this is kind of what the show is about. The show's kind of about literally doing the revolution, like worldwide internationalist revolution. My man went there and did it. And I think this is like quite a watershed moment for our show that we've had someone like that on here.
That guy shot ISIS.
Just shot ISIS. Fucking murked ISIS.
Okay. Well, Red Planet is supported by our viewers and listeners at patreon.com/red. _planet. There are a bunch of different tiers that you can support us at, but we're not going to tell you about them. We're just going to say that at the highest tier, which is the sicko tier, that you get this very special thank you message on every episode. Thank you to our sickos, JBP Queen Pib and Risk Inverse. Thank you so much. You helped make the show possible.
Thank you.
But also, we make the show possible by being the hosts. So, host Tim, what stuff do you have to promote about yourself?
You can find me on YouTube and Twitch as Conquest of Dread, or you can find me on Twitter and Blue Sky as Dread Conquest. And yeah, that's where I do most of the stuff, keeping it brief because we're a little bit over time this week. But what about Donald Mule? Where can we find more about that guy?
Yeah, let's keep it brief. It's linktree.ee/DJ Mule. That's DJ MUEL. Hit me up on YouTube. Hit me up on Patreon. That's it. Sophie?
Sure, it's linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars, all one word. Sophie, that's my name, and then from, that's a common word you should know, and then Mars, that's a planet. So that's linktree.ee/Sophie from Mars. I'm returning to publishing videos after a hiatus to make my personal life better and happier. And I appreciate anyone who can subscribe to my Patreon or send me money as a one-off like Alexis was talking about. The links are there on Linktree, and I'll be hopefully returning to making videos or publishing videos this month. Got a new essay I've almost finished going up on my Patreon soon. Yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. No show next week, but we'll be back the week after. All right.
Goodbye.